So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps keep these late night voyages sailing. While you're at it, drop your city and what time it is down in the comments. Always cool to see who's joining from where and when. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first time you see your own wanted poster, it doesn't feel real. The parchment is torn at the edges, nailed to the side of a crumbling port wall, fluttering just enough in the sea breeze to reveal your face, or at least the charcoal version of it, a jawline smudged to look more masculine than it is. The name underneath is Jonah Black, close enough to your real one that you flinch. But now, you're not free anymore. Shackles bite into your wrists, still red from the irons. You're surrounded by the musk and sweat of captured crew members, most of them mumbling curses or crying quietly behind clenched jaws. The HMS Mercy, ironically named, groans under your boots. You're headed to a place where mercy is optional, and where being female, especially disguised as a pirate, throws every rule into chaos. When they first yanked the hat from your head, it took the powdered wig with it. The moment your curls spilled out, tangled and unmistakably feminine, the crowd's energy changed. One guard backed away like he'd seen a ghost. Another laughed, short and sharp, as if the sea itself had played a joke on him. You stared straight ahead, remembering how to stand like a man, even if your disguise was unravelling with every gust of wind. See, pirates weren't supposed to be women. Not really. There were rumours, sure, whispers of Bonny, Mary Red, Ching Shi, but most people still believed piracy was a man's game, all swagger and spit and sabres. The idea that you, a woman, could have spent the last 4 years pillaging alongside the best of them. It scrambled their little naval minds. You sit now in the belly of the ship, breathing in the mouldy rot of bilge water and old rope. You hear footsteps above, maybe the clink of an officer's boot, maybe just another crewman. The sounds all blur together after a while. You've stopped trying to count days. All you know is that you're sailing away from freedom, and probably toward the gallows. Still, you're not exactly broken. There's something about the way the guards look at you now, like they don't know what to do with you. You've shattered the script. If you were a man, they'd already be writing your death notice. But now they have to think about it. Some look at you with disgust, others with fascination. One even asked you if the stories were true, if you really gutted a Spanish privateer with a broken tankard. You didn't answer, but you did smile. A little historical fact for your situation. During the Golden Age of Piracy, women on board ships were generally considered bad luck. Superstitious nonsense, of course, but powerful nonsense. So most women who wanted in on the game had to cross-dress and fake their way through it. That's what you did, binding your chest every morning, lowering your voice, studying the way men spit, walk, curse. Over time, it became natural. It had to. The sea didn't forgive second-guessing. The quirky side of that? You're not alone. You actually knew of 3 other women sailing under assumed names in your lifetime. One was Eddie, the gunner who once taught you how to clean a flintlock with seawater and spite. She was caught before you, tried to pretend she was just a camp follower. The courts didn't buy it. You haven't heard of her since. There's an open debate that's probably circling even now in the minds of your captors. What is the proper punishment for a female pirate? Is it the rope, same as a man? Or is there some twisted chivalry at play, like banishment, labour camps, or forced re-education via convents? The law is fuzzy. In fact, most judges have no official protocol when it comes to women captured with cutlasses in hand and gunpowder on their breath. Up on deck, you're pulled into the sunlight. Blinded for a moment, you squint at the coastline drawing nearer. A port town, not familiar, not friendly. Already a crowd gathers. You hear them long before you see them, cheering, spitting, shouting things like witch and hell's mistress. Some throw food, someone else throws a stone. You don't flinch. You've stood your ground on bloodied planks with cannonballs overhead. This is just the warm-up act. Your chains rattle as they drag you off the ship. The wooden dock is slick under your boots, salt-soaked and sun-dried in patches. You pass a boy selling oranges who stares at you with wide eyes. You wonder if he'll remember this moment, if he'll grow up telling stories about the pirate woman who walked like a man and smiled at death. And yes, you smile again. Why not? It's probably the last good expression you'll get to make for a while. They shove you into a carriage. The city smells like fish and coal smoke, but somewhere underneath it, you detect something else. Fear. Not yours. Theirs. They don't know how to handle a woman like you, and in that confusion, in that space where their rules break down, there just might be a chance. You close your eyes and let the wheels clatter beneath you, already planning what you'll say at trial, if they let you speak at all. You sit in the cell, not pacing, there's not enough room for that. Just breathing, trying to stay in the moment. The iron door creaks whenever someone walks by. You've learned to hold your breath when it happens, just in case it opens. Funny how things go quiet before the worst parts. You'd think trial day would come with trumpets, or screams, or even a jeering crowd, but when they come for you, it's just 2 guards and the dull clang of keys. You don't speak as they fasten manacles back on your wrists. One of them eyes you like. He's not sure whether you're a prisoner or a myth. You almost wink at him. Almost. The court is above the jail, which feels poetic and cruel at the same time. 1 floor up and you're already a spectacle. The building smells like old ink and new sweat, and the floorboards creak in protest with every step. The guards push open double doors and you step into the courtroom. It's brighter than you expected. Sunlight slices through tall windows like a blade, illuminating the dust swirling in the air. There's a gallery above, packed with onlookers, their mouths open in half-eaten gasps. You feel them staring like they're reading the punchline of a joke they don't fully get. The judge doesn't look up right away. He's old, thin, with skin the colour of forgotten parchment. When he finally does glance your way, his brows twitch in surprise. So do several of the barristers. The clerk fumbles his quill. You can almost hear the collective what in God's name rise from their chests. A woman? Here? In pirate trousers, hair chopped short, arms sun-darkened from years on deck? This is new. This is trouble. The bailiff reads out charges. Piracy, mutiny, murder, theft, impersonation. The list goes on. You could have died of old age listening to it all. The courtroom hushes again when your name is announced. Jonathan Black, alias Jane Blackwood. The crowd makes a noise, like a wave of gasps cresting over stone benches. And now it begins. What they don't expect is how clearly you speak. You tell them how you joined the crew under false pretenses, yes, but how you fought as hard as any man. How you never killed except in battle, never stole except under pirate code. You don't apologise. That seems to rattle them even more. You hear murmurs. Unrepentant, unnatural, possessed. One of the magistrates, round-faced, nervous, clears his throat and asks if you understand the charges. I do, you reply. Do you understand what it means to survive in a world not made for you? He doesn't answer. There's an old maritime law they dust off for this case. An obscure rule saying women captured as pirates can be tried under special moral consideration. It's vague, almost poetic in its vagueness, and it gives the judge wide discretion. Too much, maybe. They're trying to figure out if you're a criminal or an outlier, a mistake, a scandal. Historical footnote here. During the 17th and 18th centuries, courts didn't really know how to deal with female pirates. And Bonny and Mary Read were sentenced to death, only to delay execution by claiming pregnancy. That move worked for a time. Whether it really spared them or they later escaped or died in prison is still debated. You know that story? Every woman pirate does. You stand straight, even when they make you turn so the gallery can see what womanhood has become. You're poked and prodded, verbally for now, by the prosecution. They ask if you seduced the crew, if you lured men into sin, if you used your womanly wiles to navigate naval warfare. You want to laugh. Instead, you say flatly, I got blood under my nails same as they did. I used a flintlock, not perfume. Some people titter. Others scowl. The judge bangs his gavel. And then, just when you think the madness can't spiral further, a minister stands up from the gallery and begins to pray over you. Loudly, rambling about Jezebels and judgment. You sigh. One of the guards shifts awkwardly beside you, clearly trying not to meet your eye. The strangest thing, you feel calm. Maybe it's because you've already imagined the rope, practiced the weight of it, the drop, the darkness that follows. What can they possibly say in this stuffy wood-panelled room that will scare you more than what you've already faced at sea? Still, you're not immune to doubt. In a quiet moment, while the lawyers bicker over whether your testimony counts as credible, you glance at your reflection in the polished brass hinge of the prisoner's box. You barely recognise the face, hardened, sharper, and yet not entirely unlike the girl who first stowed away in her brother's clothes and snuck aboard a merchant ship with nothing but a pocket knife and ambition. A quirky detail you might appreciate. One of the jurors, a woman rare as a four-leaf clover, is scribbling notes furiously. You don't know her name, but you wonder if she sees something of herself in you, or if she'll later say, well, she was wild but brave. The open debate playing out now is less about guilt and more about identity. Are you a woman pretending to be a man, or a pirate pretending to be a woman, or something entirely outside their understanding? Are you to be punished as a criminal or pathologized as a freak? You begin to realize something unsettling. They don't fear you because of the crimes. They fear you because you didn't ask permission to be dangerous. That's the true offence. The judge finally calls for a recess, and you're led back to your cell. Your legs ache from standing. Your mouth is dry. But you know that your performance has shifted the tide just slightly. The jury isn't unanimous. That's obvious. Yeah, the muttering. Some are fascinated, others horrified. But fascination, that's something you can use. Down in the dark again you lie on the narrow cot and trace the cracks in the stone ceiling with your eyes. Tomorrow they'll ask for a verdict. You know they might still hang you. But you're also starting to wonder, could you flip this story? Could you turn their courtroom into a stage? One thing's for sure, you're not going quietly, and you wake to the sound of bells ringing from the harbour. It's still dark in your cell, but outside the world is already stretching, yawning and gathering for spectacle. Trial Day 2. Or what they're now calling the curious case of the pirate woman, as if you're a shipwreck pulled from a fairy tale and dragged through the courts for inspection. You splash cold water on your face from the cracked basin in the corner. The reflection in the metal pitcher startles you. Eyes too tired for your age, jaws set like someone about to command a ship. The guards bring stale bread and a bruised apple. You eat it anyway. You've learnt that dignity doesn't always taste sweet. When they open your cell, you're ready. This time the courtroom's even more crowded. People press in shoulder to shoulder, fanning themselves with handkerchiefs and court notices. Someone's brought a parrot. It squawks something impolite right before you step inside. Today's not about guilt. That's already assumed. It's about what to do with you. That's where things get tricky. Back on the Bloody Mary, your ship, your home, you were captained by merit. Not by seduction, not by design, but by merit. You earned it. Fought tooth and nail for it. Most of your crew didn't even know you were a woman till the very end. It's not like you made a point of hiding in the shadows, you just didn't draw attention to what didn't matter. But now, now it matters. The court can't stop talking about it. You listen as your life gets dissected into speculation and theories. Did you start pirating out of desperation, they ask? Or was it some kind of political statement? Were you mad? Were you cursed? You almost want to stand up and say, no, I just wanted to live free, and piracy, for all its flaws, was the only place I found that. Historical tidbit worth dropping in. Pirate codes, especially among democratic crews, often allowed for meritocracy. If you fought well and shared loot fairly, you rose in rank, no matter your origin. Black pirates, escaped slaves, and even former navymen turned traitor found their place on deck. Gender, though, that was the final frontier. Few dared to cross that line. You did. And you weren't just good at it, you were better than most. One of the witnesses takes the stand. He's an officer from the Navy ship that captured you. He talks about your ship, how organised it was, how your crew was surprisingly loyal, how you almost slipped through their fingers in that early morning fog. He doesn't mention that you threw a cutlass at his head, narrowly missing his eye. Maybe he's embarrassed. Or maybe, just maybe, he respected it. Then comes one of the merchants you raided. He's sweating through his powdered wig, face flushed, voice shrill. He calls you a demon, claims you flirted with him before stealing his cargo. That never happened. You remember that day. It was raining. You barely spoke. But here he is, painting a fantasy of sin and scandal because that version of you fits better into the narrative they need to hang. Quirky courtroom moment? Someone from the gallery shouts, "Let her sail again," and is promptly escorted out. You can't help it. You smirk. Even the judge pretends not to notice. But now, the moment everyone's been whispering about finally arrives. A murmur ripples through the room. The judge leans forward and asks the question that's been dangling in the air since your first appearance. Are you with child? You don't blink. This you expected. See, there's an old legal rule, the pleading the belly clause. If a woman sentenced to death could prove she was pregnant, execution was postponed. In many cases, indefinitely. Some women used this to delay. Some used it to escape, and in rare cases, they were quietly pardoned or vanished into exile. Mary Read and Anne Bonny both pled the belly. No one knows for sure what happened next. Now it's your turn. "I am," you say, keeping your voice even. The room erupts. Half the gallery gasps, the other half erupts into furious murmuring. The judge's gavel comes down like thunder. The court demands proof. A midwife is summoned. You're led to a side chamber. It smells like vinegar and wool. The examination is quick, clinical, and humiliating. When the midwife returns, she nods once, and just like that, the gallows wait. But only, not yet. The judge announces your sentence. Stay of execution until after childbirth. No more specifics. No talk of what comes next. You're led back down into the belly of the jail, surrounded by voices that don't know what to make of you. A pirate, a woman, a mother. That last one makes even you pause. You're not actually pregnant, of course. That detail came courtesy of another prisoner, a friend of sorts, who slipped you the secret days ago. A sliver of soap soaked in red berry juice and a mashed fig pulp smeared under your skirt before the exam. Enough to fake signs, confuse a tired old midwife. Risky? Absolutely. But you didn't survive cannon fire and mutiny just to fall apart over a loophole. The deception buys you time, and time out here is the only real currency. Back in the cell, you're finally alone again. The torchlight flickers, casting shadows that sway like ship masts on the wall. You lie on the cot and listen to the mice scuttling between the stones. You think about the next step, the next lie, or maybe the truth. And here's the open debate circling your thoughts now. Was the lie worth it? Some historians believe women pirates used pregnancy as manipulation. Others argue it was a survival tactic in a world that offered no alternatives. You're still deciding. You'd rather not die. But what exactly are you saving yourself for? You run a hand down your side, tracing the old scar from a cutlass wound you took in the Caribbean. You remember the sting of sea salt in the gash, the way your first mate, an old Spaniard with 2 teeth and a soft heart, stitched it shut while singing you lullabies in a language you didn't understand. That was freedom. This is purgatory. Still, you've bought yourself days, maybe weeks, and with that time, who knows? You smile again in the dark, the kind of slow grin that used to scare your enemies more than your blade ever did. Let them wonder. The cell gets colder the longer you're in it. You're not sure if it's the stones or just the way time crawls now, slow and heavy like molasses in winter. Word spreads quickly that you're with child, and the guards who once spat near your feet or barked orders with thinly veiled threats now glance at your belly with cautious eyes as if pregnancy has made you sacred, or worse, human. You're moved to a different cell, this one on a higher floor with a barred window the size of your palm. The daylight trickles in like it's doing you a favour. There's straw on the floor, freshish, and a cot that hasn't collapsed under its own sorrow. Luxury by dungeon standards. And then comes the waiting. The court has no idea what to do with you now. They have delayed the execution, sure, but they didn't expect the case to catch fire with the public. People want updates. Pamphlets get printed with exaggerated illustrations. Some show you cradling a baby, others with a dagger in your teeth and a baby cannon on your hip. They don't know which version of you they prefer, Madonna or Medusa. You can't help but laugh when you hear a vendor outside calling 2p for the pirate mother's tale. They've turned you into a character. That might be your best defense. The guards talk about you when they think you're asleep. You overhear one say he wouldn't be surprised if you snapped their necks with one hand. Another says you cursed the whole courtroom. One night, a drunk officer stumbles into your cell with a candle and just stares at you for a while. You don't move. Eventually he leaves, muttering, "Don't look like no devil to me." You figure he'll get reassigned soon. Eventually they send in someone new, a priest. He's young, probably fresh out of seminary, pale and earnest, with the eyes of someone who still believes every soul is savable. He calls you child, which nearly makes you punch him on the spot. He asks if you've thought about confession. You say you don't feel like lying today. He says God already knows your heart. You tell him God was suspiciously absent when your last ship sank in a storm off Tortuga, drowning 12 men and a goat. The priest flinches, the goat part got him. Still he visits often. And though you mock him, you don't mind the company. He brings stories, and stories are something you miss. One day he tells you about a woman named Mary Bryant, a convict who escaped a penal colony and sailed thousands of miles with her children. You nod slowly, storing the detail like it's treasure. Survival through motherhood. That's one you haven't played with yet. Let's zoom out for a second for a historical fun fact. Many captured women pirates weren't executed immediately. Some were imprisoned for years, others sold into forced marriages or conscripted into labour colonies, sugar plantations, sewing rooms, or nunnery-run hospitals. Reform was the word tossed around. It rarely worked. Most just found new ways to rebel, even in shackles. That brings us to the less official part of your new routine, meeting the other women. You're not the only one stashed away in this building. Below the courtroom and beside the kitchens, there's a long, narrow hall of cells that hums with low voices, whispers, and laughter that's more bitter than sweet. The guards start letting you walk through for exercise, under heavy supervision, of course. That's where you meet Grace. She's missing 3 teeth, has a nose that's broken twice, and introduces herself as the last living daughter of Neptune. You like her instantly. She says she ran away from a merchant's life to follow her lover, a sailor who jumped ship in the East Indies. When he died, she just stayed on, kept sailing, took jobs where she could, became a pirate when someone mistook her for a boy and handed her a cutlass. Her voice has the rhythm of waves, easy and dangerous. Then there's Magda, who claims she poisoned a nobleman in France and stowed away on a cargo ship to escape. She's a little intense, very funny, and walks like she's still drunk on revenge. It wasn't the arsenic that got him, she says one day, peeling an orange with a spoon. It was the guilt. Or maybe the arsenic. I'm not a doctor. These women, hardened and strange, are your kind of people. They trade stories like coins. They ask about your ship, what flag you flew, how you ran your crew, whether you ever killed anyone for talking back. You answer honestly, mostly. You admit the first time you drew blood, it made you cry later, alone, where no one could see. Magda nods solemnly and says, "It always does. The first one. After that, it's just red." Among these women, you feel something close to ease, not comfort. That's too soft, but recognition. You've all been tossed out of the roles written for you, and instead of begging to be let back in, you rewrote the play. Now you're all backstage, waiting for the next act or the final curtain. The debate of the day among them is what will happen if your lie is discovered. Grace bets they'll hang you faster than you can curse. Magda says they won't dare. She thinks your story is too valuable. You've become famous, even outside these walls. A folk tale in real time. That's your quirky twist of fate. Your very survival may depend not on truth or justice, but on how entertaining you are to the masses. A real-life story that sells more pamphlets, inspires more ballads, and keeps tongues wagging in taverns across the coast. You lie in bed that night, staring at the moon through the bars. You think about what might come next. If the baby lie won't last forever, what will? Can you escape, fake your death, buy your way onto a ship? The questions roll in like waves, endless and never quite crashing. Somewhere outside, a gull screams. A rat chews something too near your cot. You close your eyes and imagine you're back on deck, salt in your hair, sun on your skin, and the wheel in your hands. Free. Just for a moment. Then you open your eyes and hear the distant sound of chains clinking down the hall. A new prisoner. Or maybe the end of someone's story. But not yours. Not yet. You're roused before sunrise by the jangle of keys and the dull, wet cough of a guard who always smells like boiled onions. He doesn't say anything, just unlocks the door and gestures. The shackles are already dangling from his hand, but he seems unsure whether to use them. You give him a look that says don't even try, and to your surprise he doesn't. He just grunts and motions for you to follow. The hallway feels colder than usual, but maybe it's just the silence. No rats tonight, no whispers. The cells of the other women sit quiet as tombs. You pass Magda's and she lifts her chin slightly in greeting, a flicker of eye contact and a smirk. It's enough. You're not going to the courtroom this time. No, they lead you through a narrow staircase to a back chamber, one with stained glass windows and high-back chairs. The air smells like beeswax and old ink. A fire crackles low in the hearth, but it doesn't take the chill from the room. Sitting at the far end is a panel of men, the judge among them, his wig sliding to one side like it's trying to escape the conversation. They're not here to sentence you. That would be too easy. No, today they want answers. You're told to sit, you don't. Instead, you stand with your hands behind your back like you're still on the quarterdeck. One of them clears his throat and begins, in that condescending tone reserved for people who believe their title outranks your life. They ask about your time as captain, about how you commanded the men. Did they know you were a woman? Did you tempt them? Did you lie to keep their loyalty? You answer coolly, I gave orders, they followed them. That's how command works. Another man, a portly gentleman with a quill tucked behind one ear, leans forward and asks, Did you ever use your charms to secure victory in battle? His voice trembles a bit, as if the idea excites and terrifies him in equal measure. You stare at him for a full 3 seconds. Sir, the only thing I used was cannon fire and well-timed fear. A long pause. You think you hear the fire spit in amusement. And then comes the question they've been building toward. What do you think led you to this life? This one you let hang in the air. Not because you don't know the answer, but because you want them to feel the weight of it. So you say, what leads anyone to it? Hunger, violence, the promise of something better than obedience. I wasn't born with silk on my shoulders. I learned early that no one's coming to save you, so I saved myself. You can almost feel them squirm in their velvet chairs. One writes something quickly on a scrap of parchment. Another whispers to his neighbour. Historical sidebar. If you were looking in from the gallery, courts in this period were obsessed with motive, especially when a woman stepped outside the neat little box of femininity. It wasn't enough to commit a crime. They needed to understand why. Was she heartbroken? Hysterical? Possessed by Satan? Anything but rational rebellion. The idea that you made choices, calculated, strategic ones, challenges the whole system. That's what really scares them. And here's a weird but true fact. During the 18th century, there was a pamphlet floating around claiming that women pirates often disguised themselves not to escape punishment, but because they were naturally bloodthirsty and more cruel than their male counterparts. Imagine that. A woman fights like a man and suddenly she's a demon in breeches. Makes you want to burn the paper it was printed on. Back in the chamber, the judge sighs heavily and sets down his pen. We're in possession of a dilemma, he says. Like that's news to you. We can't hang you, not yet, but we can't let you live as a martyr either. There it is, the core of it. You've become something they can't control, and they hate that. So they propose something else, something you didn't expect. Transportation, the clerk says, almost gently, to the colonies. You would serve your sentence in labour under strict supervision. You're silent for a moment. He continues. There is precedent. Female convicts sent to work camps or placed into service arrangements. If you agree, the court may grant clemency. You raise an eyebrow. You want to sell me off as a servant? He shakes his head. Not quite. You'll be watched, tracked, but you'll live. And there it is, the choice. Not freedom, not dignity, but life. In exchange for exile and hard labour, they're offering it like it's a favour, like it's mercy. There's an open debate inside you now, fierce and ragged. Is it worth it? Is this another kind of death, or is there, tucked inside the offer, the thinnest thread of opportunity? You finally nod once. I'll go, you say. Then you add with a half smile, but I won't be planting cabbages if that's what you're picturing. The clerk blushes. The judge exhales. The deal is sealed. You're taken back to your cell, this time without shackles. The guards avoid your gaze. The hallway is quiet again. But it feels different now. Heavier. You know the women will want to know what happened. You're not sure yet how you'll explain it. When you lie down, you stare at the ceiling and count the breaths between now and the voyage ahead. There'll be a prison ship packed and rank, a long journey, foreign land, chains of a different kind, but you've survived worse. And there's a whisper in the back of your mind, an old phrase you once heard from a Caribbean smuggler who drank gunpowder with his rum. Exile is just another coastline. Maybe, just maybe he was right. The prison ship arrives in the harbour with a groan like it's dreading its own purpose. You get one look at it through a narrow slat in the wagon shaft, carts you from the jail to the docks, and it's as miserable as you imagined, 3 decks high, barnacled, sagging at the seams and already trailing the scent of rot and sick. A floating purgatory bound for some forgotten colony where they'll turn convicts into manual labourers, then call it redemption. They load you aboard at dawn. No crowd this time, no pomp, just grey light and seagulls screaming like they've seen this play before. There are other prisoners, mostly women. Some coughing, some wide-eyed, some already hollow. You scan the faces and spot Grace, barefoot, bruised knuckles, eyes still bright with defiance. She gives you a nod like your crewmates again. Magda's not here. You never found out where they sent her. You suspect she made her own arrangements. Below deck, it's all wet wood, mildew, and the scent of damp despair. Iron rings are embedded into the floorboards, and they run chains through them in a neat, almost polite line. You're chained next to Grace, which feels like a small stroke of luck. The woman on your other side won't stop crying into her hands. She won't tell you her name, and you don't push. The ship lurches as it casts off, and you feel the tilt in your bones. That familiar sway. Part of you wants to savour it. You haven't felt the sea beneath your feet in weeks. Not like this. Not free exactly. But still, moving. There's a strange kind of peace in that. A guard shouts orders from above, his voice bouncing off the beams. Below, no one listens. One woman is singing a sea shanty so quietly you almost miss it. The same song your crew used to hum during storms. You close your eyes and let it carry you, just for a second, back to better winds. There's a historical wrinkle in this moment. Convict ships weren't rare in the 1700s. Britain used them like a broom, sweeping up the poor, the petty criminals, the rebels, and the inconvenient. Female convicts especially were in demand, not for their crimes, but for their bodies. Colonies needed wives, housekeepers, unpaid labour. Some were assigned to men as if they were livestock. Others, if they were lucky or clever, found loopholes. You're not sure yet which way you'll land, but you're already watching for the angle. A few days in, the ship becomes a universe. You learn the rhythms of the crew, the sound of the cook's boots, the snarl of the first mate. You make mental maps of how long it takes the guards to check the lower deck, where they stash the drinking water, and which plank creaks the loudest when someone sneaks across it. Grace is doing the same. She whispers it all to you at night like she's sharing gossip, but it's strategy, the beginnings of a plan. And then comes the third night, the storm. It hits out of nowhere, as they always do. Dark sky ripped open by lightning, rain lashing sideways like the sea's trying to peel the paint off the sky. The ship groans like it's being crushed in a giant's fist. Water crashes down the stairwells and soaks everything. The lanterns sputter. Screams echo down from the upper decks. And through it all, something cracks in you. Not fear, not anger, just clarity. You weren't meant to rot in some colony like a penitent ghost. You were built for storms like this. You rise, chains clinking, and steady yourself as the floor tilts. The woman beside you is praying. Grace is muttering curses at the rain. You reach into your memory for every time you steered a ship through worse. You remember the angles, the currents, how to lean into the sway, not against it. And it feels right, even here in shackles. That's when the barrel breaks loose. It crashes down from an upper hatch, slams into the deck, and rolls straight through the group of chained women. Chaos, screaming. One of the guards trips and falls headfirst into the beams. Blood. A keyring slips from his belt and skitters across the wet floor. Time slows. You look at Grace. She's already seen it. Her fingers twitch. Yours do too. Here's your quirky moment. The woman who's been crying this whole time suddenly yells, "Saints preserve us!" and kicks the keyring toward you with her bare foot like she's been waiting her whole life for this. You don't hesitate. You lunge, shoulder first, grabbing the keys with hands gone stiff from iron and cold. You don't even know which key it is. Just start jamming them into the lock around your ankle, praying to no god in particular. First one doesn't work. Second one sticks. Click. Freedom sings in metal's soft surrender. Grace gets her shackle off next. The others are too panicked or stunned to follow. You don't blame them. You don't have time to rally a mutiny. You only have time to act. The two of you bolt up the stairs. Another guard tries to block you, but Grace slams her shackled fist into his throat, and he crumples. You don't stop. The rain blinds you. The deck is chaos, ropes flying, sailors shouting, sails tearing like paper. And then you do something even you don't believe. You grab the wheel. You throw your full weight into it, yelling orders at stunned crewmen who instinctively obey. Maybe they recognise command when they hear it. Maybe they're too shocked by the sight of a chained woman steering a ship to question it. Doesn't matter. You bark out corrections, call the winds, curse the storm like it owes you money. You keep the ship upright. When the worst of it passes, there's jaunts. The ocean flattens like it's exhausted. The clouds retreat. The moon peeks out, curious. And there you are, drenched, shaking, still gripping the wheel, like it's the only real thing in the world. A quiet voice behind you says, "What now, Captain?" You look at Grace and you say, "Now? We see where this sea takes us." The open debate is already raging. Do you try to take over the ship? Could you really? Or do you use the chaos to vanish at the next port, start over somewhere they don't know your name? You're not sure yet, but as the ship limps forward into the dawn, your hand still on the wheel, one thing is suddenly very clear. You weren't meant to fade away. By sunrise, the storm is a ghost, a memory only the cracked sails and bruised ribs of the crew remember. You're standing near the wheel still, the last threads of adrenaline snapping in your chest. The ship creaks and groans beneath you, the wind now slow and lazy, like it's pretending nothing ever happened. You lean your weight against the railing, soaked to the bone, jaw tight, watching the horizon bleed into pale pink and silver. Grace sits nearby, unshackled now, but still watching your back like you're on a battlefield. There's a scrape on her forehead, and her clothes are clinging to her like wet rags. She smiles that half-feral grin you've come to trust more than most prayers. "You know," she says, "I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone more reckless than me." You don't smile back. Not yet. You're still calculating. The ship didn't exactly fall into your hands, but it also didn't shake you off. The guards are rattled. The officers, bruised and confused, have retreated below to lick their wounds, and the crew, what's left of them, are looking at you like they've already started rewriting the story in their heads. It wasn't a mutiny. Not technically. But there was a storm. A panic. A woman who took the wheel and kept the ship from sinking. You can work with that. One of the deckhands, a wiry thing with the sun-spotted skin and no front teeth, approaches cautiously. "The helmsman's dead," he says, scratching his beard, "and the first mate's unconscious." He nods toward the broken rail where the helmsman's body still lies half-covered by a tarp. You glance at the horizon. No land in sight, no officers giving orders, and a crew that, in this moment, is more lost than you. So you give an order. A simple one. Get him overboard before the stink sets in. It's not compassion. It's just smart seamanship. Later you'll find out the ship's original destination. A penal colony in the Caribbean. One of those half-established, under-resourced British outposts where disease and corruption keep pace with religion and reform. You are going to be re-educated, which, in your experience, always means starving in a field while a fat man with a cane explains virtue. But plans change. The captain never made it through the night. That's the official story now. The storm took him. Or the rigging did. Or maybe it was the mast that fell. Or maybe he slipped. Who's to say? The sea keeps secrets better than courts do. By midday you've called what's left of the crew to the main deck. You stand where the captain once stood, the ship listing gently as the sun warms your back. They're dirty, bruised eyes, sceptical, but they're also listening. You tell them the truth. Sort of. That the ship's leadership is dead, that someone needs to take the helm, that you've captained before, and unlike the cowards who locked themselves. Below during the storm you stayed up top, that you didn't ask for this, but you're not turning it down either. A few nods, one man spits overboard, another mutters something about letting the devil steer, but no one stops you, and in the sea's silence that's as close to a vote as you'll get. Now for the historical fact that makes this all feel even stranger. During several transport voyages in the 18th century, there were documented cases of female prisoners rising to positions of informal power, not because the system allowed it, but because chaos did. Ships were unpredictable beasts, and when storms or disease thinned the ranks, the strongest voices filled the vacuum, regardless of the body's shape around them. There's still the issue of the guards. Not all of them are dead. 2 have injuries, 1 has vanished entirely, and 1, the youngest, barely older than a boy, approaches you later with a trembling voice. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," he says, eyes darting behind him, "but I got no orders left, no commander. You tell me what to do, and I'll do it. I don't want to die out here." You study him. Not tall, not strong, but scared in a way you can use. "Then go below," you say, "and tell the others. I'm the chain of command now. They don't like it. They're free to jump ship." He nods, swallows hard, and disappears. Grace leans against a barrel near the mainmast, arms crossed. "You just going to run this ship until we hit land?" You shrug. "Depends who we hit first, Navy or pirates." She grins again. Either way, they're in for a surprise. Below deck, the women are divided. Some are terrified, some suspicious, and a few are already asking if this means they're free. You tell them what they need to hear. We're not chained anymore. That's a kind of freedom. They nod mostly, some still don't speak at all. Quirky detail you pick up later. Someone drew a little figure of you on a scrap of sailcloth. Grimy charcoal lines, hands on hips, cutlass tucked into your belt, baby bump included. The pregnancy myth still lives. You're not about to correct them. Myths are useful currency. And then comes the open question, the one you lie awake chewing on while the ship creaks and the stars shift overhead. What now? You can't exactly steer this thing into a British port. They'll string you up faster than you can say mercy. But a pirate haven? Or a neutral island? Maybe. There are whispers of free ports where gold speaks louder than law. You've been there before, it's possible. But you also know this can't last. The moment the crew feels strong again, or hungry enough, or scared enough, they might remember you're a woman, a prisoner, and possibly a liar. Authority at sea is a tricky flame, bright and warming one day, a mob's torch the next. Still, for now, you have the wheel, you give orders, they obey. That's the beginning of every real story you've ever cared about. As the sun sets, painting the waves gold and fire red, you stand at the helm and breathe in the salt like it's medicine. The air is cleaner out here. You can almost forget the gallows, but you never forget completely, because somewhere out there, the law still wants you dead, and the sea, though she loves her children, takes her toll eventually. By the third day at sea under your command, the rhythm of the ship settles into something halfway between routine and restlessness. The sails have been patched where the storm tore them open like old paper. The galley fires are flickering again, and the wounded have stopped moaning quite so loudly. The crew doesn't exactly salute you when you pass, but they don't spit at your feet either. That's progress. Below deck, the women prisoners have begun to organise. Grace has taken on the role of unofficial quartermaster, doling out rations and, more importantly, rumours. She reports that morale is hanging by a thread, and that a handful of the guards still locked below are beginning to stir up talk of retaking control. You tell her to keep an eye on them, and she just nods and mutters, "Already got 2 of them." Sleeping with one eye open. Still, you're not naive enough to think this accidental hierarchy you've stepped into will hold forever. Fear made you captain, and survival keeps you there, for now. But hunger is rising and desperation is always circling like a shark under the keel. You've known mutiny from both ends, and you can smell it brewing like overboiled rum. You gather the prisoners, what remains of them anyway, on deck in the late afternoon sun. There are just under 20, most of them grimce-faced, battered, clutching what scraps they've scrounged. They stand in a loose ring, squinting at the brightness. Some are barefoot. One wears a shirt that once belonged to a dead officer. You count 5 with visible injuries, 1 with a bandaged leg, 2 still barely speaking. "I'm not here to rule you," you begin, voice low but steady. "And I'm not here to save you. That's not how this works. But this ship is moving, and it's not crashing, and we've got food for at least another week. So if you want to keep breathing, eat. If you want to keep walking, help. So if you want to keep complaining, you pause. Try me." The silence that follows is not exactly applause, but it's the kind of quiet that says, "All right, we'll see." One woman speaks up, a thin thing with sharp cheekbones and a sailor's hunch. "What happens when we hit land?" You think for a moment. That depends on which land we hit. It's not an answer, and she knows it, but it's true. You haven't yet decided what port to aim for. You've been steering mostly east-southeast, keeping an eye out for the smaller islands, the ones less likely to fly British colours or fly any flag at all. There are places out there where law doesn't stretch so far, places where names change and coin matters more than crimes. But this woman, her name is Maud, you later learn, asks the question everyone's too afraid to say out loud. What if they hang us anyway? You meet her gaze. They might, you admit, but not today. And that's all most of them need. Not hope, just not today. A curious historical point. There were actual cases of female convicts and pirates who took over vessels or led escapes, especially when the regular command structure broke down. In some rare but documented instances, these women weren't punished immediately upon recapture. Sometimes they were used as bargaining chips, sometimes quietly disappeared. One was even married off to a plantation owner as part of a social solution, which tells you everything you need to know about how power worked back then. That night, as the crew sleeps in rotating shifts and the sails ripple against a soft breeze, you hear a knock, if you can call it that. against the door to the captain's quarters. You didn't choose to sleep there, it just happened. The actual captain's belongings are still scattered across the cabin, like ghosts. Maps, a cracked globe, a pewter flask with initials too smudged to read. His hat's still on the hook. You haven't touched it. The knock comes again. You open the door to find one of the younger prisoners, no more than 16, with tangled hair and eyes like burnt copper. She introduces herself as Elsie. She's holding something in her hand, a bundle of crumpled letters, water-stained and singed at the edges. "They belong to the helmsman," she says, almost apologetically. "I found them near the crates, thought maybe you'd want to see." You take them, not sure why, and she scampers off like she's afraid you'll change your mind. Inside the bundle are fragments of a life, letters to a wife perhaps, or a lover. One of them is unfinished, cut off mid-sentence. The seas are rougher now, and I feel less... That's it. No date, no signature. Just that half-thought dangling in time. You tuck the letters into a drawer and sit with the weight of them for a while. Everyone left something behind. Some left blood, some left rumours, and some left love letters no one ever read. Later that night, Grace slips into your quarters uninvited and flops into a chair, chewing a piece of salted fish with loud, deliberate satisfaction. "They're whispering again," she says. "Some of the women think you're cursed, others think you're a saint." You raise an eyebrow. "Which do you think?" She shrugs. "I think you're tired, and I think we're heading towards something sharp." You nod slowly. "Then I'll try not to blink." She laughs and tosses the fishbone into the corner. Good, wouldn't want to miss the crash. You spend the night plotting possible destinations. There are 3 islands you could aim for that aren't likely to turn you in for a reward. One is known for smugglers, another for its refusal to pay tribute to any flag, and the third, well, let's just say the third has a reputation for welcoming exiles, especially ones with stories to trade. But no matter where you sail, there's always the chance someone will recognise you. The pregnant pirate tale has taken on a life of its own. According to Grace, someone even carved a likeness of you onto a chunk of driftwood. "It's mostly boobs and rage," she says. "Not very accurate, but impressive craftsmanship. You're becoming a symbol whether you like it or not. That's dangerous. Symbols are harder to hide than people." As dawn peeks over the water, a gull lands on the railing near the helm and stares at you. You stare back. It squawks once, then flies off. Probably doesn't mean anything, or maybe it does. The island appears just before noon on the 6th day, a sliver of green and gold rising from the sea like something sketched into the horizon by a bored god. You've been watching the water for hours, squinting against the sun, one hand on the wheel, the other gripping a tin mug filled with something that might once have been tea and now mostly tastes like despair and seawater. But then, there it is. A curve of palm trees, cliffs, and smoke trailing from somewhere inland. You signal Grace with a nod, and she climbs the rigging like she's part monkey. Spyglass in hand, she scans the shoreline. "No flags," she calls down. "1 dock, maybe 2 buildings. No cannons. Looks abandoned, or just quiet." Quiet is good. Quiet means no British uniforms, no gallows standing at attention on a pier, no men with itchy trigger fingers and a list of your crimes tucked in their breast pocket. You adjust your course, your heart thudding a little harder now. This could be it, sanctuary, or at least a temporary hiding place. You've learnt not to aim too high with your hopes. You're not looking for paradise, just a place that won't immediately try to execute you. As the ship approaches, the island grows sharper. The shoreline is rocky in places, but a curved bay offers shelter. The sails creak as you shift their angle, calling commands like you were born with salt water in your lungs. The crew, now a blend of ex-convicts, uneasy sailors, and a few opportunistic prisoners who've learned to swing a rope, moves faster than they did 2 days ago. They're not loyal, not yet, but they're obeying. That's enough. You drop anchor about 100 yards from the shore. A handful of rowboats rest on the deck, leftovers from the ship's original mission. You send out a scouting crew, Grace, 2 women from below deck, and a guard you've semi-convinced not to slit your throat in your sleep. You stay aboard, watching the coastline with narrowed eyes, feeling every second stretch like wet rope. An hour passes, then 2. Finally the boat returns, gliding over the calm water like a shadow. Grace jumps aboard and flashes you a grin that's more teeth than smile. No flags, no soldiers, just 2 huts, some goats, and a man with a busted leg who thinks we're missionaries. You blink. Missionaries? He didn't look too hard at the ship. Said he hasn't seen visitors in 6 months. I told him we were delivering souls to the edge of salvation. She laughs. I think he bought it. That evening you allow the first landing party. 10 people, you included. It feels strange to set foot on unmoving earth again. Your knees tremble slightly, and the ground feels like it might shift under you anyway, but the air is warm, scented with mango and wood smoke, and there are chickens scratching at the dirt near the huts. You didn't expect chickens. You didn't expect this calm. The man Grace mentioned is real. A wiry, half-mad ex-whaler who fractured his leg falling from a tree and never left the island afterward. His name is Corwin. He stares at you with one milky eye and one clear one, as if trying to see which version of you is true. You look like trouble, he says. Then he offers you a coconut. You take it. Fair trade. Corwin tells you the island is known on old maps as St. Delia's Mouth, though no one calls it that anymore. No one really calls it anything. It's too small to be a port, too isolated to be strategic. Once it was a supply stop. Now it's a half-forgotten smudge. He claims pirates sometimes come through, usually just long enough to repair sails or bury something valuable. Or someone. You ask if any British patrols check in. He laughs so hard he coughs up something unpleasant. They'd have to be drunk or dead to find this place. Quirky detail. Corwin swears the island's haunted by the ghost of a Spanish nun who cursed the sand with her last breath. He says you'll know her by the smell of salt and lavender. Grace starts calling every breeze Sister Lavender after that. You make a mental note to never sleep too close to Corwin. Back on the ship, the mood shifts. Not everyone is thrilled by the idea of landfall. Some fear abandonment. Others think it's a trap. One woman, Cora, a former laundress who once knocked out a guard with a soapstone, asks if you're planning to maroon them. You tell her no. Then, because honesty's always a dangerous spice, you add, not unless you give me a reason to. Later that night, the open question becomes a quiet chant in your head. Stay or sail? You found a hideaway, a neutral place. But how long can you stay before the Navy picks up your scent? Before someone bribes Corwin into sending a letter by ship? Before one of your own sells you out for a pardon? You lie awake on the sand, staring up through palm leaves, listening to the crackle of the fire and the soft snoring of exhausted women who haven't slept on solid ground in months. You remember your ship, the Bloody Mary, now likely at the bottom of the sea or claimed by someone else. You remember what it felt like to be in charge of something more than survival. And then you remember your face on that wanted poster. The legend is still growing. You heard from Grace that someone started calling you the Siren of the Gallows. She said it like a joke, but it's not, it's a brand now. People are trading stories about you. Half of them are nonsense, riding sharks, cursing storms, birthing twin sons mid-boarding party. But the other half, they are starting to sound close to the truth. That's the problem with myths. They're harder to run from than chains. The next morning you wake to find a goat chewing your sleeve and Grace already gathering supplies to build a lookout post. She's decided the island is tolerable. That's high praise. You help her lash palm fronds together while the rest of the crew trickles onto the island in small groups. Some cautious, some skipping like children. For now, St. Delia's Mouth is yours. But you don't unpack your things, because you know the sea always calls her debt in full. The first week on the island feels like a fever dream that somehow forgot to burn out. For once, there's no screaming. No guards shouting numbers. No ropes binding wrists. No clanging chains echoing off stone walls. Just the hiss of wind through the trees and the lapping of waves against the hull of your half-broken ship, now anchored lazily in the shallows, like a drunk uncle passed out at a wedding. You oversee the unloading yourself. Barrels of hardtack and salted meat, coils of rope, water casks, one small crate of rum, blessedly intact, and everything else that wasn't nailed down or full of rot. The women work in pairs, hauling supplies across wet sand, sleeves rolled, feet bare, eyes still flicking side to side like they were expecting someone to shout trick at any moment. But no one does. Corwin watches all of it from his hammock, pipe in hand, laughing occasionally. He tells you that the last group of visitors included a crew of smugglers who tried to sacrifice a pig for luck, and ended up setting half the jungle on fire. You can't decide if he's lying. He might not know either. The plan, if you can call it that, forms in layers. First, survival. Build shelter. Divide rations. Assign work. Second, recon. Is there another part of the island worth exploring? Hidden caves, freshwater springs? Third, and this one you keep to yourself. Figure out whether you're staying long enough to matter, or if this is just a convenient hiding spot before you vanish again. You don't call it a camp, you call it shore base, which sounds less permanent. Grace suggests naming it Gallows Bay, which is dark, poetic, and absolutely on brand. Cora votes for Free Woman's Rest, which almost makes you choke on your coconut water. In the end, no one agrees, so the place remains nameless, which feels honest. One of the first issues to pop up is the question of punishment. A woman named Tess is caught hoarding dried fruit under her cot. It's a stupid risk, small theft, small stash, but in a place like this, even raisins can start a war. You call a meeting, not formal, just a ring of tired, half-sunburnt bodies around the fire pit. You lay the facts out. There's no gallows here, no magistrates, no brigs. So if someone steals, you say, what happens? The answers come slowly. We take her food for a week. Put her on guard duty. Make her dig latrines. Grace suggests letting the chickens decide, which gets a laugh, and that's useful too. You're not building a democracy, you're building consensus by degrees, one small shared laugh at a time. In the end, Tess spends 3 days on firewood duty and sleeps outside the ring. Not a real punishment, just enough discomfort to remind everyone that survival here depends on some form of trust, even if it's loose and full of teeth. Here's a historical bit that suits this moment too well. During the early years of some penal colonies, especially female-dominated ones, rules were fluid, guards were scarce. Women often established their own systems of barter, justice, even leadership. There's one recorded case of a female convict group that organised a nightly singing circle to resolve disputes. You're not quite there yet. But you see the roots of something similar starting to sprout. Community, born not out of idealism but shared necessity. By the third day, the lookouts report smoke on the horizon. It's faint, just a grey ribbon curling toward the sky. Could be nothing, could be everything. You climb the bluff overlooking the bay, take the spyglass and study it. No sails in sight, no rowboats, but the smoke stays steady, unnatural in its rhythm. You call Grace. She squints at it and mutters, "Campfire. Not ours. Not small either." Corwin, lounging nearby and eavesdropping as usual, offers his wisdom. Could be settlers. Could be pirates. Could be worse. You arch a brow. What's worse? He takes a slow puff of his pipe and says, "Men with rules and no sense." That night you double the watch. Everyone feels the shift in the air, even if they pretend not to. There's something about smoke that unsettles the blood. It's a sign always of another human somewhere nearby, and humans are trouble. As the wind shifts, blowing the scent of wood smoke closer, you sit by the fire and think about your crew. They're not exactly unified. Some are loyal to you, some are just loyal to not starving, and a few, you suspect they'd sell you to the first passing officer with a purse full of gold and a good set of manacles. One of them might be Ivy. She's a former barmaid from London, with hands too soft for hard labour, and a smile that shows up too easily. She's been asking too many questions lately, about your past, your plans, your condition, which, as far as anyone still knows, involves a non-existent pregnancy that's dragged on for about 10 suspicious weeks. You give vague answers, she gives tight smiles in return. You tell Grace about it and she grunts. I'll keep an eye on her, maybe both, if I'm feeling generous. In a rare moment of openness, you admit something. Not to her, not to anyone really, but to the fire, the waves, the dirt under your boots. You're tired, not of leading, not of surviving, but of proving it over and over again. Every new shore, every new threat, every face that asks if you belong. Sometimes you miss your ship, your real crew. The ones who didn't care what was under your clothes, only how steady your hand was on the wheel. The ones who died in storms and ambushes, and some who just vanished between ports. You don't mourn them all equally, but you remember each of them. One particularly vivid ghost is your old navigator, Hugh, quiet as the grave and twice as sharp. He used to say, "The sea's honest, land lies." You didn't believe him then, you almost do now. The next day the smoke's gone, and just like that, as if it was never there. But the feeling remains, thick as humidity. The sense that someone is watching or has already watched and moved on. You gather the core group, Grace, Cora, the two strongest rowers, and the one former guard who's mostly stopped glaring at you, and you begin planning again. You're not ready to leave, but you need to be ready to leave, because no one ever stays lost forever. and your name is still out there, still gathering gravity. You sleep with your boots on that night just in case. You wake before the sun, muscles stiff from sleeping on the half-built shelter floor. There's dew on your boots, and the coals in the fire pit have gone cold. A rooster is already screaming his head off in the bushes, unaware that half the people within earshot have considered strangling him daily since his first 4 a.m. sermon. You pull yourself up, stretch until your joints crack, and wander to the edge of the bluff where the sea meets the sky. It's a painting again, unreal, too soft, deceptive, because today's the day you leave. Not for good, not yet, but it's time to test the world beyond this island, to see if it's still burning with your name. You've decided to take a small scouting crew out to the neighbouring island to the south, the one Corwin described as a cesspool with trade routes, which in your language means possibility. Grace is already packing supplies into one of the longboats. She's got a flask between her teeth, 2 knives in her belt, and a dead fish under one arm. You don't ask about the fish. With Grace, it's better to let her explain or not. She's decided you'll take only 4 people, herself, you, the younger guard, named Tom apparently, and Ivy. Yes, Ivy, you didn't want to bring her, she asked, politely, which always makes you suspicious. But Grace said, better we keep her where we can see her. So now she's along for the ride, her hands calloused from days of hauling firewood, her eyes just a little too interested in everything. You row out before the sun has climbed above the trees. The water is glassy and silent. Your ship bobs in the shallows behind you, its patched sails furled like folded wings. The others, Cora, Maud, Elsie, watch from the sand, hands shielding their eyes. You don't wave. As you row, Tom tries to make conversation. Used to fish these waters with my da, he says. Before the war, before everything. You grunt. That's the extent of your sympathy. The neighbouring island is bigger than yours, more developed, if you can call a handful of huts and a single crooked dock development. It smells like smoke, salt, and something slightly fermented. As you approach, a man appears on the dock, no weapons drawn, just a hand up in greeting. You nod and step ashore. Name's Merrick, he says. You here to trade or trouble? Depends what you're offering, you reply. He doesn't flinch. Good. You hate when they flinch. He points toward a lean-to with barrels stacked beside it. Got rum, some dried beans, couple spools of rope, and 3 goats I'd like to pretend aren't possessed. You're about to reply when Ivy steps forward. Any news from the mainlands? Ships? Couriers? You shoot her a look. Merrick shrugs. Had a brig pass 2 weeks ago. Said they were hunting a rogue transport vessel. Prison ship gone missing. He looks at you then, long and thoughtful. Some say it wrecked. Others say it was taken by sirens. You smile. Must have been beautiful ones then. He chuckles. Terrifying ones from what I heard. You trade 2 knives and a pound of dried fish for rope, a spool of thread, and a bottle of something labelled only as elixir, maybe drinkable. You leave the goats. Grace pulls you aside as the others browse. Merrick's not dumb. He's heard of us. Or suspects. If word gets back to anyone important, we'll have company. You nod. Then we'll have to move faster. Back on the beach, Ivy kneels near the water, her fingers tracing something in the sand. You glance once, then look away. You've seen symbols like that before, coded messages, sometimes written in sailors' shorthand or smugglers' marks. This one? Not familiar. But you don't like the shape of it. On the row back, no one talks. Ivy hums something low and eerie. You make a mental note to question her later, and maybe sleep with a knife a little closer. When you arrive, things have shifted. Cora greets you with a nervous expression. 2 men came ashore while you were gone. Not ours. Didn't say much. Left before we could stop them. Headed inland. You curse quietly. The jungle here isn't vast, but it's dense enough to swallow people whole. If someone's watching, hiding, waiting, you'll never know until it's too late. And this is where the rules shift. You gather everyone near to the fire pit, the same one where Tess once sat in disgrace over a handful of fruit. You explain what happened. You mention Merrick, the potential tip-off, the strangers. You don't sugarcoat anything. Here's the truth, you say. We're not hidden anymore, and we can't trust this island to stay quiet, so we prepare. Grace draws a knife and immediately volunteers to scout the jungle with 2 others. Tom offers to help reinforce the boats. You begin listing supplies you'll need if evacuation becomes necessary. But Ivy doesn't offer anything. She just watches, quiet and slippery. Later, as the group disperses, she walks up beside you. You're planning to run, she says. You stare at her. I'm planning not to die. She nods, lips curved like a blade. You should know I was never planning to stay. It's not a threat, it's a confession. And you hate how calm she sounds saying it. You leave her standing by the fire and return to your shelter. Inside, you unroll the map that once belonged to the ship's dead captain. You trace your finger along the coastline. There's an old smuggler's cove 2 days south, hidden between cliffs. If it's still unclaimed, it might buy you time. You hear rain start to fall outside, soft at first, then heavier. You wonder if it will wash away the footprints of those strangers. That night you dream of smoke again, and fire, and ropes that tighten no matter how many times you cut them. The island was supposed to be a pause. Now it's just another ticking clock. You spend the next 2 days preparing like the world is ending, which, in your experience, means it probably is. The jungle becomes less of a backdrop and more of a threat. Its trees standing just a little too still, its shadows pressing too close after dark. Grace and the 2 scouts return with nothing concrete, no camps, no smoke, no abandoned gear. But she looks at you with that quiet certainty that says something's out there. Watching, waiting, or circling. You don't argue, you feel it too. The camp takes on a different tone. It's not panic, not yet, but it's close. The laughter around the fire is forced now, sharper at the edges. People sleep in shifts. There's always someone on lookout, and the rotation gets longer each night. No one wants to admit they don't feel safe anymore, but the way hands keep drifting toward blades, and the way conversations cut off the moment you pass, it all adds up. Cora organises a weapons inventory. What you've got is rough. 2 working musters, a collection of poorly kept cutlasses, a dozen decent knives, and a few fire-hardened spears fashioned from scavenged planks. Not ideal, but better than bare hands and hope. And then there's the food. Rations are running low again, and fishing's been poor. Something about the tides, or maybe the cursed nun Corwin still mutters about every time someone stubs a toe. You've got maybe 5 days' worth of supplies, stretched thin, unless someone finds a source of fresh fruit or a friendly trade. You don't have many friends left. You start making a list of who might turn on you first. Ivy, obviously. She's moved from subtle glances to open probing. She asks too many questions about the longboat's seaworthiness, about your map, about your contingency plans. You've stopped pretending you trust her. Now it's just a question of whether she'll betray you for power or for mercy. Then there's Tom. Loyal enough, but too soft. You don't know if he'd hold a blade if it came down to it. His heart's good, which ironically is the kind of thing that gets people killed out here. Grace? She's solid. Brutal, if she has to be. You know she'd follow you straight into the abyss, but you also know she'd kill you if she thought it was the only way to save the others. It's not personal, it's practical. The rest, Cora Maud, Elsie, the handful of ex-guards now integrated into the crew, they're a mix of survivalists, opportunists, and people who just want to be left alone. You envy them in a way. You forgot what it feels like not to carry every decision on your back like a sack of wet stones. There's a curious moment late in the afternoon when you spot Ivy kneeling near the jungle's edge. Not watching, not sneaking, just still. You approach slowly, not hiding your footsteps. She hears you, but doesn't turn around. There's someone in the trees, she says, far off, just past the second ridge. I saw a reflection. Metal, maybe. You don't respond right away, and then, how long have you known? Since yesterday. Why didn't you say something? She stands and finally looks at you. Because I wasn't sure if they were coming for you, or for us. And that's when it happens. The flicker of motion on the bluff, and it's fast, too fast, but not invisible. You shout. A single word. Down! A shot cracks through the air. Loud, unmistakable, it slams into the tree just behind you, splintering bark into your hair. People scream, someone drops a pot, chaos erupts. You scramble behind a barrel, scanning the ridge. Another shot, this one wide, kicks up sand 10 feet to your left. You shout for Grace. She's already barking orders, dragging people behind the larger trees, pushing them toward the lean-to shelters. Cora's yelling something about the muskets. You grab one and check the flint. It's old but functional. You swing it toward the bluff and fire. The recoil knocks your shoulder back harder than expected, but the shot rings true, if not accurate. The bluff goes quiet. You wait. No more gunfire, just the wheeze of wind and the pounding in your ears. You run toward the tree line, Grace at your side. You don't go far, just enough to get a better view of the ridge. It's empty now. Whatever was there, whoever was firing, is gone, but you find tracks, fresh, heavy boots, not yours. The camp is a mess when you return. Everyone's shaken, huddled, eyes darting like fish in shallow water. Ivy stands apart from the others, arms crossed, watching you as if waiting for the moment you declare the world's ending. You almost do. Instead you say, "We move at dawn." That night you hold a quiet council with Grace and the others. The vote is unanimous. You can't stay. Someone found you, might have been a scout, might have been bait, but next time they'll come with more than one musket and bad aim. The plan is simple. 2 longboats, 1 overloaded ship, and are heading south toward that hidden cove you traced days ago on the old map. It's risky, but so is breathing now. You divide the supplies, 2 days' food, minimal water, tools, weapons. You tell everyone to sleep with what they can carry. Grace volunteers to take the rear boat and keep watch. You lie awake that night under a tree, back against the trunk, knife in hand. You don't close your eyes. You listen to every footstep, every cough, every crackle of the fire. You wonder who pulled the trigger. Not just the shot, the decision. To come after you now, when your legend is loud enough to draw reward hunters like flies. The quirky detail. One of the women, Elsie, decides that she's not running. She carves a message into a plank of driftwood and plants it at the edge of the camp before you leave. It says, "We were here, we are gone, we are not done." It might be the most honest sentence anyone's spoken in weeks. Dawn comes grey and slow. You load the boats in silence. Corwin stands at the edge of the shore, sipping from his ever-present bottle. "You'll miss the ghosts," he says. You smile grimly. "They'll follow." He laughs and waves. "Then you'd better keep rowing." And you do. The oars cut through the water like dull knives, slow and steady, your arms already aching before the island has even vanished behind the mist. You sit near the bow of the first longboat, shoulders braced, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the rolling grey ahead. The sea this morning is a mirror. Calm, eerie, too still for comfort. There's no wind, no waves, just the quiet slap of wood against water, and the occasional cough from one of the rowers behind you. Grace commands the second boat, keeping her distance but close enough that you can hear her voice every so often. Low, calm, a lifeline against the hush. You don't talk. No one does. There's nothing to say. You left before the sun fully rose, left without a goodbye, without a fire, without even the clatter of pans. A clean break. Or as clean as anything ever is in your life. The plan is still the Smuggler's Cove, a stretch of narrow beach nestled between cliffs, marked only on maps older than half the crew. Corwin once called it a place for quiet criminals and loud lies, which to be fair describes most of your travelling party. You scan the faces around you. Cora, grim and sweating already under the morning heat. Tom quietly keeping rhythm on the oars like he's counting his regrets. Ivy, who meets your gaze every now and then like she's trying to solve a puzzle with one missing piece. And Maud, whose left hand trembles slightly every time she pulls. They're all tired and scared. But no one's panicked. Not yet. That's its own kind of progress. About 2 hours in, you spot something floating in the water ahead. A crate, half submerged, its corners swollen, seaweed trailing like ribbons. You motion for the boats to slow. Grace rows up beside you, and you both examine it without words. She raises her brows. You nod. You haul it aboard together. It smells like fish and rot. The markings are faded, but you see enough. A shipping insignia you recognise from your early days, back when you were still learning how to tie knots and lie to quartermasters, is from a navy vessel. Grace pries it open with a small axe, the blade glinting as the wood splits. Inside, mouldy flour, a broken flask, and surprisingly, a letter sealed in oilskin. She hands it to you. You open it carefully, the parchment crinkling in your fingers. The writing is shaky, water-smeared. It says, "Ship lost. All hands but 3 pursued. 1 woman among us. She says she's a ghost, or maybe just tired. They said she was the siren of the gallows. I think they were right. If you find this, we were here. If she's with you, good luck." You stare at it for a long time. Grace asks, "Friends of yours?" You fold the letter and tuck it into your coat. "Doesn't matter now." Here's a strange historical footnote. During the peak years of piracy, sailors would sometimes leave floating messages in bottles or barrels. Part distress call, part confession, part superstition. Some were recovered, some were hoaxes, but some, like this one, felt like a whisper across time. You've become one of those whispers. People don't know who you are anymore. They only know what you mean. You row on. By noon, the sky begins to shift. Clouds stack along the horizon like bruises. The wind picks up, slow but certain. The sea's colour deepens, goes from blue to iron grey. You feel it in your gut before you feel it in the air. The storm is coming. Not a thunderclap rage. No, this one's colder, more deliberate. A storm that wants to drag, not break. You shout orders, adjust course slightly. The cliff should be visible soon. You remember them from the old map, twin rises of rock like teeth, framing the narrow bay. Tom calls out, pointing. There! You see it. A dark slit in the shoreline, sharp and shadowed. The cove. You push the crew harder. The wind is at your back now, but that's no comfort. It pushes the boats faster than you'd like, toward rocks you can barely see, and waves that are sharpening like blades. Steady, you shout. Aim for the centre. Grace's boat gets there first. She jumps out, waist deep, and helps drag it onto the beach. You follow, crashing into the surf, lungs burning, shouting over the wind. You make it, barely. But the moment you collapse onto the black sand, soaking and half breathless, you feel it, safety. Temporary, fragile, but real. The cove is narrow, sheltered by jagged cliffs. There's a small cave at the back, dry and dark, enough room for 10, maybe 15 people. More if you stack them like firewood. Everyone's panting, soaked, coughing, but alive. You give them 10 minutes, then you start assigning tasks. Ivy rolls her eyes. Tom nods. Cora doesn't wait. She's already building a windbreak from driftwood. You move toward the back of the cove where the cave mouth looms. Inside it smells of damp stone and old secrets. You step in, alone, and listen to the silence. And you find something. A mark scratched into the rock, simple, crude, but unmistakable. A ship's wheel, surrounded by flames. Your old crew's mark. Someone's been here. The realization hits like a wave. Maybe this wasn't just a lucky destination. Maybe someone meant for you to find it. Or maybe someone else used it and didn't make it out. You call Grace. She stares at the symbol, frowns. Coincidence? You shake your head. Nothing out here's coincidence. Night falls fast in the cove. The fire burns low, throwing flickers of orange against the stone. People sleep in pairs, or alone, curled into blankets like hermit crabs in borrowed shells. You sit near the cave's mouth, keeping watch. The sea beyond looks calm now, but you know better. It's never calm. It just pretends. The open debate in your mind is this. Was this a trap? A gift? A memory left behind? The ghost of your old life lingers in that cave. You feel it in the rock, in the scratch-marked symbol, in the way the wind seems to whisper names you've tried to forget. You stare out at the water, whispering your own name once, quietly, like a test. It doesn't sound like it belongs to you anymore. The days in the cove blur like spilled ink, slow and streaked with tension. The storm lingers offshore, never quite breaking, but always there, a smear of bruised clouds low on the horizon. You ration the food with surgical precision, stretch each meal like it's a sermon. Fish caught in tidal pools, a few limp sea crabs, the last crumbs of hardtack from the transport ship's stores. No one complains aloud, but you can feel the hunger moving through the camp like a ghost, sharpening moods, fraying nerves. You spend your time watching the water. That's where the stories come from. The sea speaks before anyone else does. A shift in the tide, a ripple that doesn't belong. These are the signs you've learnt to trust more than words. Grace asks if you ever get tired of staring at nothing. You tell her it's not nothing, it's where things start, and that's exactly what happens on the 5th morning. You see it first. A blot on the horizon, black against the silver line where sky kisses sea. A ship. You grab the spyglass and squint, holding your breath. It's no merchant vessel, no fishing rig. She's got 3 masts, battered sails, and a hull painted a dull charcoal, low and fast. A sloop, maybe a brigantine. You can't see her colours yet, but something in your gut twists. You lower the glass. Visitors incoming. Grace doesn't waste time. She's already barking orders, kicking sand over the fire, pulling the boats further into the cove's shadows. People scramble, blades get checked. The younger ones, Tom, Elsie, a girl named Bryn, who used to sew uniforms for army officers, stand straight there, trying to look less scared than they are. Ivy. She disappears for a full 10 minutes, so you don't like that. The ship draws closer. It's flying no flag. You hate that most of all. You station everyone near the rocks, ducked behind outcroppings and seagrass, weapons ready. You know this game. A no flagship approaching a hidden cove means one of two things. Either someone's desperate, or someone already knows you're here. Neither option smells like peace. And then, just before it slips behind the nearest cliff, you see it. The emblem painted near the prow. Faded, chipped, but unmistakable. A red serpent, wrapped around an anchor. You nearly drop the spyglass, because that mark belonged to a crew you knew well. Once. Long ago. Captain Eliza Ferro, pirate queen of the southern routes, former ally, sometime rival, full-time storm incarnate. If that's her ship, the game just changed. Ferro is the kind of woman people wrote songs about, and not the gentle kind. You met her years ago in a Havana tavern, halfway through a brawl over stolen silverware and rum, and took one look at you, laughed, and offered you a drink instead of a blade. You served under her for 6 months before you claimed your own ship. When you left, she gifted you a compass that only pointed south. So you never forget where the real trouble lives, she'd said. If she's found you, it could mean rescue, or reckoning, maybe both. You don't move until the sloop anchors just beyond the outer reef. A single longboat lowers, carrying 3 figures. One of them stands tall at the bow, hair whipping like a black flag, hands planted on hips. Even at a distance you know her walk. Eliza Ferro is here. You don't wait for her to land. You walk to the beach and meet her halfway, standing ankle-deep in surf, arms crossed, watching her approach with the cold amusement of someone meeting an old ex at their own funeral. "Eliza," you say. She grins. "Heard you'd gone to ground. Thought I'd see if the legend lived." "You're late," you reply. "I'm dramatic." Behind her, her crew rows silently. One of them, small, wiry, scarred, eyes you like, he's calculating your weight in gold. You file him under problem. Eliza steps onto the beach, water soaking her boots. She takes one long look at you, head to toe, and lets out a slow whistle. "Well, you look like 10 miles of bad road. And you smell like the last tavern I burned down," you counter. She laughs, full and rich, then abruptly her smile fades. "They're looking for you, you know." "Who?" "Everyone." She reaches into her coat and tosses you a small tattered pamphlet. You open it. Siren of the Gallows spotted in the southern waters. The sketch looks nothing like you. Too elegant, too tragic. Like someone drew what guilt would look like if it wore boots and lipstick. "I thought the gallows part was private," you mutter. "Not anymore," she replies. "Half the coast believes you're a ghost. The other half wants you chained and hanged before the next high tide." You nod slowly. "And you?" "I'm here to see what side I fall on." That's the thing about Ferro. She's not cruel, but she is a survivor. Her loyalty rides the wind. If you have something to offer, she'll shelter you. If not, well, she's sunk ships for less. Back at the cave, you let her see the mark, the wheel surrounded by flames. She pauses, touches it like she's checking if it's real. "You really came here," she says, almost reverently. "I thought you were smarter. I was desperate." "Same thing." You talk into the night, sharing stories, lies, and half-truths. She offers to take 10 of your people with her. Only 10. Space is tight, supplies are tighter. You realise that the real choice isn't whether you go, it's who goes with you. The quirky part? Grace declines the offer immediately. "Not her style," she says, jerking a thumb toward Eliza. "I prefer my captains quiet and dangerous, not just dangerous." Eliza smirks. "Then you haven't seen me on a good day." By morning, the debate burns like wildfire. Who gets the golden ticket? Who stays in the cove? Some argue merit. Others argue skill. Ivy argues value. Which, from her lips, sounds like betrayal measured in coins. You hate this. But you start making a list. You stare at it too long. And you realise the worst part of surviving is deciding who else gets to. You burn the list. Not out of drama, not even out of rage, just because the weight of it feels wrong. There's no perfect answer. No clean choice. The moment you started ranking who was worthy of rescue, You became something you swore you'd never be, so you crumple the parchment, feed it to the flames, and watch it turn to ash in a few lazy breaths. Behind you, the cove mutters with uncertainty. You've felt storms that made less noise. Eliza doesn't protest. She just watches you with one of her maddening smirks, arms crossed, leaning against a boulder like she's already won. You know that fire didn't fix anything, she says. Didn't intend it to, you reply. What's the new plan then? Draw straws, have a swim off? You give her a long look. I haven't decided yet. She snorts. You're turning sentimental in your exile. You ignore that. Instead, you gather everyone near the cave, letting the ocean's crash soften your words. You explain the situation. One ship, limited room, one chance at safe passage, or something close to it. You say no one's being forced, no one's being chosen. They'll have to decide among themselves. We leave in 2 days, you say. If you want to go with Pharaoh, tell her directly. If you want to stay, start prepping this cave like you live here. There's silence. Then Cora stands up, hands on her hips, and says, We're going to fight about this, aren't we? Grace mutters, Obviously. And then the arguments begin. It's not all shouting, some of it's quiet persuasion, some of it's bribes. One woman offers her last chunk of dried meat to another in exchange for first claim. Ivy, of course, gets slick with it. She starts whispering about alliances, about who's most useful, who's owed what. You don't like the way people lean in to listen. Tom comes to you later, face flushed. I don't want to leave, he says. Not without helping fix this place. The cove could work, with more time. You clap him on the shoulder. Brave, or stupid. Sometimes the same thing, he shrugs. Meanwhile, Pharaoh spends her time prowling the edges of camp, assessing everyone with that hungry pirate's eye. She talks to Maud at length, tests her blade work, then nods approvingly. She skips over Elsie without a second glance, which bothers you more than you expect. Elsie's smart, young, fierce, but she doesn't look like someone useful, and that's all that matters to Eliza. Grace finally corners you that night. You need to start thinking like her, she says. Forget who you like. Think who survives. This isn't a rescue, it's a reset. You sigh. If I do that, I won't like who I become. Grace shrugs. Then don't look in a mirror. There's a historical bite to this moment too. Something you once read in a damp, tattered book stolen from a missionary's quarters. During the transportation era, many female convicts were assigned to colonial homes not based on skill, but on appearance and obedience. Some women rebelled and were re-imprisoned. Others played the role and disappeared into history. A few even thrived, but none got to choose the terms. Now, you're flipping the script. Maybe. Barely. The next day, the long list of names shortens. Some choose to stay, afraid of what Pharaoh's life might demand. Others choose to leave, desperate for any life that isn't one spent dodging gunshots in a damp cave. Ivy makes her declaration at sunset. She walks straight up to Eliza and says, I'm your best chance at blending in where it counts. I know ports, I know fates, and I know how to make people forget things. Eliza eyes her like she's sizing up a snake in a velvet box. You steal? Better, Ivy grins. I rearrange. You'd almost admire it, if it didn't make your stomach turn. That night you sit near the cliff's edge, watching waves gnaw at the rocks below. Elsie joins you quietly, knees pulled to her chest. After a while she asks, Am I going to be left? You look at her. Her face is calm, but her hands are clenched, white-knuckled. No, you say, you won't be. She nods like she doesn't believe you, but she doesn't argue either. After she goes, Pharaoh appears. She drops a flask in your lap. Figured you might want to forget today. You take a swig. It burns like memory. She stretches her legs. Still time to come with me, you know. They'd follow you. You stare out at the horizon. And do what? Be your second? Be alive, she says simply. You let the silence speak for you. Pharaoh leans closer, her voice quieter. You're not built for hiding. I've seen what happens when people like you start thinking caves are homes. You rust. You almost laugh. Better rust than rot on a rope. She sighs. You really think the story ends any differently? You don't answer, because you know it doesn't. Not really. But maybe you can stretch the ending. Quirky moment of the night. Tom and Maud start drawing maps in the sand by firelight. Just rough sketches, potential routes, trade possibilities. Just in case, Tom says. You let them. It gives them something to hold. In the morning, 2 more people change their minds. Ivy is among them. She's now trying to get Cora to switch spots. You give them 1 more day, then the longboat will leave, and with it, the idea that anything can stay as it is. The final morning is hot and still, the kind of oppressive quiet that makes the birds forget to sing. Clouds hang low, a blanket of wool above the cove, threatening rain that never comes. The sea is unnervingly smooth, flat as a pond, and it reflects the cliffs in distorted, oily smears. Everyone moves like they're underwater, sluggish, wary, not wanting to speak anything aloud for fear of turning choice into finality. Ferro's longboat is already prepped. Her crew loads it in silence, practiced hands moving without wasted motion. They don't speak unless they have to, and when they do, it's in a clipped language you half remember from your own smuggling days, a tongue for thieves and survivors, more gesture than grammar. The boat looks too small for the weight of what it's about to carry. That feels right. You sit at the edge of the camp watching each person pass as they make their final decisions. Cora comes first, arms crossed, jaw set like stone. "I'm not going," she says simply. "Don't like Ferro's eyes. Don't like how she talks to us like we're meat in a market." You nod, no argument, just a handshake and a quiet respect. Then Maud. She walks slower, eyes on the ground. "I thought I would," she says. "Leave, I mean. But something about this place. It feels like we might build something here. Something that doesn't belong to them." You wonder if she's right, or just scared. Maybe both. Tom never even considered leaving. He spent the morning fixing one of the storage crates, muttering about supply rotation like he's been promoted to quartermaster by divine right. When you asked him why he wasn't saying goodbye to anyone, he said, "Goodbyes for people who plan to stay gone." Elsie surprises you. She walks up, satchel over her shoulder, and says, "I'm going with her." You blink. "You sure?" She nods, lip trembling, but her voice is firm. "You can't protect everyone, and I don't want to be one more weight you have to carry. I need to see what's out there." You nod slowly. "Watch Ivy." She grins, quick and fierce. "Already planned too." Then Ivy herself appears, looking smug. Of course she's going. She's packed, perfumed and polished, though the latter is probably just sweat in the rising heat. She glances at you once, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Try not to die," she says sweetly. You reply, "Only if you promise not to come back." The last to make the call is Grace. She walks the camp in slow loops all morning, checking supplies, reinforcing the cliffside lean-to, speaking with people in hushed tones. She sharpens her knives, sharpens other people's knives, watches the sky. When you finally ask, she shrugs. "I'm staying." You don't push, you just breathe. At midday, the chosen few gather on the sand. Eliza Ferro stands like a general at a private coronation, watching her new recruits with amusement and calculation. She counts heads, nods, and then turns to you. "This is a bad plan," she says. You smile. "It's the only one we've got." She pulls something from her coat and hands it to you. A scrap of old parchment, water-stained, torn at the edges. It's another map, one of the trade routes she's been running lately. "In case you last long enough to use it," she says. You don't thank her, but you keep the map. The goodbyes are not dramatic. No tears, just quiet nods, a few firm handshakes. Ivy climbs into the longboat like she's boarding a yacht. Elsie lingers, hugging Maud, whispering something to Tom. Then she squeezes your hand hard once and climbs in after her. Ferro gives you one last look. "You've got a legend to live up to," she says. "Try not to disappoint." "Make sure my name gets a good verse," you reply. She grins and orders the crew to row. You stand at the edge of the water, arms folded, as the boat glides over the grey surface, cutting a smooth line across the mirror of the sea. You watch until they become shapes, then specks, then memory. The cove feels heavier when they're gone. You gather what's left, 10, maybe 12 people, depending on how generous you're feeling with your head count. The wind picks up a little, teasing the treetops above. The waves finally break again, soft and rhythmic, like the island's taken a breath it was holding. "Well," Grace says, stepping up beside you. "Now what?" You look around at the half-built shelters, the dwindling stores, the nervous eyes. "Now we build a home," you say. Quirky detail. That night Tom carves a wooden plank with everyone's names, Those who stayed, those who left. He nails Sabid above the cave entrance, calls it the roster of the reckless. You don't correct him. That evening, people are quieter. Some sleep early, others sit by the fire and stare at the flames like they're waiting for a vision. You sit on a rock above the cove, watching the sky shift into dusk, trying to remember if you've ever really stopped moving before. Even now, with the threat gone, for now, you feel the hum under your skin, like the sea might still call you back. The open debate tonight runs in your own chest. Did you make the right call? Some would say the smart move was sailing away. Start fresh, use Pharaoh, use her ship, play this legend until the next storm swallows you. But this is different. This is something you've never had. A place that might be yours, if you can hold it, if the world doesn't find you first. As the fire burns low and the crickets begin their lullaby, you pull Pharaoh's map from your coat, unfold it slowly, and trace the trade route she marked, just in case. You never know when the sea might whisper again, but for tonight, you rest. You wake to the sound of footsteps where no footsteps should be. Not the cautious shuffling of your crew, not the soft pad of grace on patrol, but a rhythm you don't recognise, confident, measured, almost casual. It's still dark, moonlight just a smear on the sand, and the fire's nothing but a pile of glowing bones. You don't move, you listen. There's laughter too, a low chuckle, male, coming from just outside the cove entrance. Your hand slides to the knife beneath your blanket. Then another voice, female, whispering, too low to catch the words, but the tone is unmistakable. That syrupy, private way people talk when they think no one else is awake. You recognise it. It's the voice of collusion. You rise silently, stepping over the sleeping forms of Tom and Maud. Grace is missing from her usual spot by the cave mouth. You hope that means she's already noticed. As you round the curve of the rocks, you spot them. Ivy and a man. She is supposed to be gone. She was on that boat, damn it, gone with Pharaoh, sailing into the grey. Yet here she is, hair down, sleeves rolled, leaning far too close to someone who does not belong. You slip behind a boulder and watch. He's tall, lanky, with a navy jacket that doesn't quite fit. His face is turned from you, but the pistol tucked into his belt tells you all you need to know. He's not a drifter. He's military, or used to be. His boots are polished, his hands are clean. He's out of place. And Ivy, sweet, ambitious, always hiding something Ivy, is handing him something. A folded scrap of parchment. Your heart thuds once, loud and slow. They whisper a bit more. He touches her elbow. She lets him. Then he disappears into the jungle as easily as he appeared, vanishing like smoke. You step out of the shadows. Ivy, you say, voice low. She startles, but not as much as she should. Well, she says, brushing her hair back, you're up early. So are you. Her smile is all teeth. Just getting some air. You don't answer. You just stare until the smile fades. She tries again. He's no threat. Then why didn't you introduce us? She shrugs, but her eyes flinch. Didn't think you'd approve. You take a step forward, the knife still in your hand, not raised but visible. Where's the rest of Pharaoh's crew? Ivy's silence is the answer. Something went wrong out there, or maybe it went right for her. She sighs, then switches tactics. You know what I offered him? Nothing. Just a message, a name, yours if he wanted it. And did he? Her smile returns. Of course he did. Everyone wants the siren. There it is. The one truth Ivy can't keep inside. She's not here for survival. She's here to ride your legend like a wave. You don't kill her. Not yet. But you do call Grace. And when Grace arrives, half asleep, blade in hand, you explain. Ivy protests, lies, spins some story about a lost contact, a possible alliance, a way off the island that doesn't involve Pharaoh or another burning ship. But her voice wavers, and that's enough. You exile her. Not death, not chains. You give her a satchel of food, a canteen, and the map Pharaoh gave you, only it leads nowhere. A scribbled trail to a reef long since swallowed. Find your own legend, you say. She spits in the sand, wipes her mouth and walks. She doesn't look back. Later, Tom asks where she went. You say she had a choice. He doesn't ask again. The next few days are tense. The jungle feels closer, the air heavier. You start rotating watch more frequently, posting lookouts along the ridgeline even during the day. There's no sign of the man Ivy met, no other footprints, no gunshots in the distance. But that doesn't mean you're safe. You never are, and the others feel it too. Cora sharpens her blade twice as often. Maud sleeps with a spear beside her. Elsie, now back from Pharaoh's ranks, patrols the cove at dawn and dusk like it's her personal vendetta. You try to focus on the bigger picture. The cove needs reinforcing, the cliff paths are slippery and crumbling. Tom suggests setting traps. You approve. Maud finds a freshwater spring half a mile inland, sweet relief since the last of your stored water has begun to smell like death. Grace oversees hunting, and for once, returns with a rabbit instead of bad news. It feels almost like a reset, but not quite, because Ivy isn't the first and she won't be the last. You know that now. There's always someone waiting to trade your life for a name. It's a historical truth too. Female pirates, real ones, rarely made it out clean. Those who weren't hanged were sold out by lovers, betrayed by the crew, or disappeared into new identities. Mary Red died in prison. Anne Bonny vanished into legend. Qingxi, she cut a deal and retired rich. But most were turned in for coin. And you're somewhere between the gallows and the ghost. That night you sit on the bluff with Grace. She doesn't speak much, just chews on dried fish and tosses pebbles at the sea. You think she'll come back? She finally asks. You shake your head. Not alone. Grace grunts. And we'd better finish those traps. A quirky footnote to the day. Tom builds a scarecrow out of spare clothes and driftwood and plants it on the ridge with a borrowed hat. Says it'll confuse the watchful. He names it Captain Misfortune. Someone tacks a fake pistol to its side. For a second, it almost looks like you. You sleep a little lighter that night. Because now, you're no longer just surviving this place. You're defending it. You don't plan to return to the sea, but it starts whispering anyway. It begins with a sound. A soft scrape, like wood on rock. You hear it at dawn, just under the call of the gulls and the hush of the tide sliding over sand. It's faint, but wrong. Too steady to be natural, too smooth to be wind. You're half asleep in your lean-to, boots still on, one eye open like a habit you can't shake. At first you think it's the usual dreams, the sea calling you back with false promises and old ghosts. Then you hear it again. Scrape, pause, scrape. You're up before you realise it. Knife in hand, ducking under the edge of the tarp roof and padding barefoot across the sand. The cove's quiet. No one else stirs. The fire's out, just a few pale embers clinging to the ash like desperate children. You follow the sound. Around the bend of the rocks, past the sleeping forms of Grace and Maud, you see it. A boat, not one of yours, small, low, oars tucked neatly beside the hull. No sail, no flag, just a single man bent at the waist pulling the boat up the sand with slow, strained motions. His back is to you, and for a moment you think he's alone. Then you see her. She steps off the boat like she's walking into the church. Hair tied back in a tight braid, coat dry despite the morning damp. She doesn't smile. Doesn't blink. "Hello," she says. You don't recognise her face, but you recognise the tone. Polite, calculated. The voice of someone who's spoken too many words with too little meaning. Grace appears beside you a heartbeat later, rubbing her eyes and already reaching for a blade. The woman raises her hand slowly. "We're not here to fight." "Good," you say, "because we don't bury guests anymore." She chuckles softly. "We're not guests either?" The man turns around finally. He's older, balding, with sharp cheekbones and a scar running from his chin to his ear. Navy, or was, once. The way he stands, the posture, it's drilled, not learned. "Commander Alden," he says. "Retired." You nod. "You always visit remote pirate coves for fun?" The woman speaks again. "We're looking for someone. Figured this would be the place." You glance at the boat. Just enough room for 3, just enough food for a day. No weapons, at least not visible, which means either they're fools or they know exactly how little they need. "Who are you looking for?" you ask. "You," she says, like it's a compliment. You sigh. Of course, and they introduce themselves properly after that. She's called Morel, a consultant. Whatever that means. They claim they're not bounty hunters, not agents of any flag. Freelancers, Alden says, looking to build something. It's not until later, after Grace has checked the boat for explosives and Tom's given them water under strict supervision, that Morel gets to the point. "There's a ship," she says, mid-sized. Fast. Stuck in a trade route tangle with no real allegiance. Her crew mutinied last month. The last captain's dead. They need someone new. You narrow your eyes. "And you thought of me," Morel shrugs. "You've got a reputation. Survivors talk, pharaohs talked." Your chest tightens. "She told you where to find me." "Not exactly," Morel says, twisting a twig between her fingers. "But she left enough crumbs, and you've left more." You think about Ivy, about the man on the ridge, about the rumours. You're not a secret anymore. You haven't been for weeks. A ship, a real one, with sails and hull and a wheel that begs for hands like yours. It's tempting, too tempting, and they know it. You ask, "What's the catch?" Alden speaks this time. No nation, no paymaster, no law, just a crew of scattered wolves and a ship that needs teeth. "And if I say no?" He glances around the cove. "Then we leave, and we offer it to someone else, probably someone worse." That night you don't sleep. The stars above the cove shimmer like coins just out of reach. You sit on the bluff again, elbows on knees, staring at the horizon, where that ship might be. You can almost hear the rigging creak, feel the sway, remember what it's like to command wind and wood and salt, and then Grace joins you. "So?" she asks. You say nothing. She doesn't push. She just hands you a scrap of paper, a sketch drawn in charcoal, a rough outline of a ship with tall masts and cannons gleaming in profile. "I asked them to describe it," she says. "This is what I got." You stare at it for a long time. There's an open debate in your chest now. Go or stay? Reclaim what you were? Or try to shape what you are becoming? A captain again? A leader? Not of castaways hiding in a cave, but of pirates, or mercenaries, or whatever that ship's crew wants to call themselves. The cove is safer now. Traps are set. Water's flowing. There's food, barely. Tom has a system, Cora has a code, Maud has a stubborn streak that will probably carry her into legend or death. Could they survive without you? Could you survive without this? A quirky twist before dawn. Elsie, once more ghost than the girl, leaves a bundle of rope at your lean-to. No note, no words, just a bundle tied perfectly into the knot your old navigator used to teach green hands. The message is clear. You're being reminded who you are. In the dark, you close your eyes and speak to no one in particular. "I'm tired," you say it aloud. The wind doesn't answer, but the sea breathes in the dark and waits. You give yourself one day to decide, just one. It's not a deadline anyone sets, not a demand made by Morel or Alden or even Grace, but something internal. A ticking that started the moment that charcoal sketch of the ship hit your palm. You know this feeling. It's the same one you had years ago, sitting in the hold of a stolen merchant vessel, salt in your hair, blood on your knuckles, staring at the captain's dying eyes and realizing you'd become something. Not just a thief, not just a liar, but a force. Now, standing at the edge of the cove with that same weight in your chest, you feel it again. But back then you had nothing to lose. Now you do. The sun crawls over the cliffs like a reluctant apology, casting long golden stripes across the sand. The tide is out. Tom is inspecting fishing nets with the fussy intensity of a man avoiding bigger questions. Cora's whittling a spear. Maud is talking to the chickens like they're her political counsel. Grace, of course, is watching you. "Should have flipped a coin," she says at one point. You grunt. Can't flip a coin for something this big. "You could," she replies. "You just hate yourself for listening to it." You spend part of the morning walking the perimeter, checking traps, pretending you're still the cautious leader who prefers stone to sail. You pause at the scarecrow, Captain Misfortune. Someone's replaced its wooden arm with a driftwood cutlass and added a seashell eye patch. You almost smile. Almost. Morel watches you from the shade, calm as ever. She doesn't push, doesn't repeat her offer, which somehow makes it harder to ignore. She's too practiced at this, letting the idea bloom inside you, letting it grow roots before you even notice you're watering it. Around midday, you catch Alden speaking quietly to Elsie near the cliff's edge. She's nodding, listening. The look in her eyes is that of someone remembering who they used to want to be. You wonder if she's imagining herself in the crow's nest of that ship, knife in her boot, wind in her hair. You wonder if you're imagining it too. You call a meeting in the late afternoon. Not everyone comes, you don't take it personally, and the ones who do sit in a loose ring on the sand. Grace beside you, Tom fidgeting with a frayed rope, Maud chewing on the end of a reed, and Cora squinting like she's waiting for a joke that hasn't landed. Elsie sits slightly apart, hands folded, but her eyes never leave yours. You tell them the truth, that a ship waits, that its crew is leaderless, that Morell and Alden are offering you the wheel, a real ship, a real crew, real danger. You don't sugarcoat it. I could leave, you say, tomorrow, maybe tonight. No one speaks for a moment. Then Tom says quietly, "Would you come back?" You look at him, and you don't lie. Maybe. That's the worst answer, and the truest one. Cora shrugs. Better you than some idiot with delusions of grandeur. Grace leans back on her elbows. You already made this place run. You'd make a ship fly. And then Maud says, just don't forget what it felt like to build, not just burn. That sticks with you. You spend the evening preparing just in case. You pack light, a change of clothes, your knife, a pistol with 2 bullets, the old compass from Ferro, the one that always points south. You don't bring maps, you know most of them by heart. Elsie finds you later, just before the stars appear. I want to come, she says. You study her. Why? Because I've been here. I've survived. I want to live now. It's not the words, it's the way she says them. Flat, decided, not desperate, just true. You nod. 1 bag, no passengers. She nods back. I know. You tell Morell your decision just after moonrise. She doesn't smile, but she breathes a little deeper. Departure at dawn, she says. No fanfare, you reply. She agrees. That night you walk the cove once more. The sand is cool under your feet. The fire's embers have gone dark. Everyone sleeps in tangled bundles of blankets and dreams, unaware or unwilling to talk about what you're leaving behind. Grace is still awake. Of course, she meets you at the bluff, stands with her arms crossed. Then, without a word, pulls something from her coat. A strip of leather, dark and worn, knotted on one end. Your old armband. The one you lost the day you went down with your second ship, lungs full of seawater and curses. Found it in the cave, she says, buried under some bones. You take it. It smells like salt and smoke and ghosts. Stay alive, she says, and if you die, die louder than anyone else. You smirk. I'll try. Historical echo here. There's a theory, unproven, argued about endlessly, that several female pirates didn't die in battle or on the gallows, but quietly took ships again under new names, new flags, even changed their faces if they had to. There's a fragment of a diary unsigned that ends with a single line. They thought they buried me. I was only setting sail. At dawn, you and Elsie meet Morell and Alden at the far end of the beach. The boat is ready. You pause for a moment, looking back. No one comes to say goodbye. That's how you asked it. No goodbyes, just a quiet departure. But someone leaves a bottle on the sand near the tide line. Wrapped in netting, a cork sealed with wax. You crack it open. Inside, a tiny scrap of cloth with one word scrawled on it. Captain. You pocket it. The boat pushes off. The cove gets smaller behind you, wrapped in morning fog. And ahead, on the horizon, you see it. A ship, not yours. Not yet, but maybe. The ship looms larger with every pull of the oars, rising from the horizon like some old god that refused to die when the Empire sank. You and Elsie row in silence, the only sound the splash of paddles and the groaning creak of wood that's seen too many salt-heavy years. The dawn light drapes the sea in bronze, and for one perfect moment the ship doesn't look like an escape or a second chance. It looks like judgment. You've had a lot of names, some whispered, some shouted, some carved into wood and hung above doorways that now lie in ruins. But none of them mattered quite as much as the one you might be asked to reclaim now, Captain. Not acting, not pretending, not running, real. As you draw closer, you can make out more of her lines. She's old but well cared for. 2 masts, square-rigged. Some patchwork sails, but clean ones. Gun ports, maybe 6 aside, closed for now. A slight tilt to her starboard suggests a ballast issue, but nothing fatal. She's moored just off a jagged reef anchored in deeper water with a thick line tied to a buoy the size of a small cart. Elsie stares up in awe. You don't blame her. She's never seen a ship like this from the deck side. Only from stories. You've seen worse, but you have also seen better fall apart in the blink of a blade. Mirelle stands near the boarding net, waiting. She's not smiling, but her posture has shifted, shoulders squared, chin high. She knows what this ship means, not just to you, but to her, to whatever plans she's wrapped you in. Alden nods from behind her, his expression still unreadable. You've decided he's the type that won't show emotion unless someone's bleeding or marrying into his family. You tie the boat off and climb up, boots slipping just once on this rope ladder. Elsie follows, not graceful but determined. Her hand grazes the edge of the hull like she's making a promise to it. You set foot on deck and let the moment hang. The wind catches your coat just right, and you feel it, that click, deep in the chest, like a door opening you didn't know was locked. The crew gathers slowly. 15 of them, men and women, some old, some not. A few have the look of ex-Navy, others scream deserter from their boots alone. They're ragged, yes, but not broken. Not yet. They're waiting, not for a speech, but for a sign. So you walk to the wheel, place your hand on it, turn once, just enough for the timbers to groan in greeting. Then you say, "Tell me what broke this ship." It's not a demand, it's a ritual. On every new vessel you always ask. A wiry woman with sunburned cheeks answers first. "Mutiny," she says. "Old captain took half the rations and sailed west. Left us drifting for 3 days." "Why didn't you follow him?" "Because we hated him," she says simply. Another steps forward, a man with a bandaged wrist and the eyes of someone who's lost too many dice games. "Ship's called the Harrow. Not her real name, though." You raise an eyebrow. "No?" "No. She's been renamed 5 times. Every captain thinks a new name will change her luck." You laugh once. "Doesn't work like that." He grins, missing 2 teeth. "Didn't think so." You spend the rest of the morning walking the deck, taking stock of these. The rigging is intact, sails need minor repairs, gunpowder's low, but the cannonballs are neatly stacked and rust-free. The galley smells like dried fish and regret. You can work with this. Below deck it's worse. Hammocks tangled, crates smashed, mould climbing the walls in lazy green fans. The lower hold's flooded 2 inches deep. No real bilge system, apparently. You'll fix that, or make someone fix it. By noon you've already chosen your first officers. Elsie, naturally, becomes quartermaster. She's too green for it, but she's hungry, and the crew responds to her in that quiet, curious way that says, maybe. You need a maybe more than a veteran who thinks they know how this ends. A lean man named Rask becomes your gunner. He's got hands like hammers and the calm of someone who doesn't waste bullets. Mirelle stays out of the chain of command. You're fine with that. She's the kind who pulls strings no matter her title. You gather the crew mid-deck. New captain, you say, new name. There are a few mutters. One even dares to whisper. Again? You don't flinch. A ship isn't her name, it's her purpose. This one's got a new one. They wait. You look out over the sea, the sky wide and waiting. You think about the cave, the scarecrow, the girl who gave you rope, the fire that refused to die. You say her name's Revenant. It hits the deck like a drumbeat. Not applause, but not rejection either. Rask repeats it under his breath like a charm. Revenant, something returned from the dead, something that should have stayed gone. You like that? A quirky side moment. One of the crew tries to offer you a parrot. Apparently it belonged to the last captain. You decline. It curses in 3 languages and makes a sound like vomiting every time someone says sail. You raise anchor at dusk. Not far, just turn around the reef, a test run. She moves slow at first, resistant. But the sails catch eventually. And when they do, oh, she moves. Not fast, not yet, but proud. She remembers. At the wheel you stand tall, boots braced, coat flaring. You give no orders for a while. Just feel her, like dancing with a lover who once tried to kill you. There's an open question behind every eye on deck. What kind of captain will you be? They'll find out. Tonight's a test, tomorrow maybe a raid, or a rescue, or a reckoning. But for now you're sailing. Not as a fugitive, and not as a symbol, but as a captain, again. You don't sleep the first night at sea. You lie in the captain's quarters, boots off but knife still strapped to your thigh, staring at the warped beams above your head, while the Harrow, no, Revenant, creaks and breathes around you. The mattress smells like mildew and whatever dreams the last captain died with. You keep the lantern low, the oil burning in slow flickering waves, casting your shadow like a question mark across the wall. The crew is quiet. Too quiet. You've given them just enough orders to keep them busy and not enough to make them hate you. Yet. Elsie patrols the upper deck like a soldier playing pirate, shoulders tense, eyes twitching every time someone sneezes. Rask has his gunners cleaning barrels by moonlight. You didn't ask for that. You're impressed. And a little suspicious. Men who take initiative are either planning mutiny or hoping for medals. Sometimes both. Morel, as always, is a shadow. You haven't seen her since sundown. She's like mould, always growing somewhere just out of sight, usually on something important. You rise just before dawn, shrug into your coat and climb up top. The ocean stretches in every direction, a perfect bruise of dark blue fading toward the east, where light leaks into the sky like someone struck gold and left the jar open. The air's cool, heavy with promise. You take a deep breath and let it settle in your lungs. Feels better than any prayer. There's a shape on the horizon. Not land, a ship. Small, sloop-rigged, no flag. You raise your spyglass. Cargo, most likely. Light crew, no guns showing, probably a smuggler. Maybe independent, maybe desperate. You call Rask. Think we can catch her? He squints, grins. With the wind we've got, by midday. You nod once. Then let's test our bite. You don't call it a raid. Not yet. You call it a conversation with sails. The crew wakes quickly when they smell blood in the wind. It's always like this on the first chase. Excitement and nerves braided into every footstep. People walk faster, tie knots tighter, whisper louder. They all want to see what kind of captain you really are. You intend to show them. The Revenant surges forward like she's been waiting for this. The sail lines hum. The wheel vibrates under your hands. She isn't fast, but she's eager. And when you yell for full wind, she doesn't groan, she growls. You draw closer by the hour. The sloop tries to run. Of course they do. But they're overburdened. Sails puffed too full, keel dragging like it's drunk. You close the gap. And when you're in range, you fire one warning shot across their bow. The boom echoes across the water like a god clearing its throat. They strike sail within minutes. You grin. This is what you were made for. You send Elsie over first, accompanied by Rask and 3 crew with pistols drawn and sabres loose. You follow last, leaping the narrow stretch between ships with the kind of practice grace that says you've done it 100 times and survived. The smuggler crew is scrawny and barefoot. No uniforms, just tunics stained with sweat and old salt. Their captain, a boy really, barely into his 20s, steps forward with shaking hands. "Please," he says, "we've nothing worth dying over." And you study him for a moment. His boots are 2 sizes too big. His coat was probably taken off a dead man. "What are you carrying?" you ask. He doesn't lie. "Ink, paper, books, some barrels of wine, no weapons, no gold." "Books?" He nods. "For a school, a new one, on Isla Palmera. Some governor's pet project. Of course, education. No faster way to get shot than telling pirates you're transporting knowledge." You walk the deck, open a barrel, inspect the contents. Wine? Yes. Not good, but not sour. The books are dry and wrapped in oilskin. Some are in Spanish, others in Latin. One's a Bible with a bullet hole in the middle. You step back and say, "You can keep the books, we'll take the wine." The boy looks stunned. "That's it?" "For today," you say. "Next time, sail faster." Rask chuckles. Elsie looks confused. The rest of the crew watches you like you've grown a third eye. You return to the Revenant with 10 barrels of wine and a crew that suddenly looks at you like you're dangerous in a complicated way. Not reckless, not soft, just unpredictable enough to make everyone a little nervous. Good, that's where power lives. Later, Morel appears like fog and asks why you didn't take everything. You reply, "Because the wine will sell and the books will make better enemies." She nods once, slow, like she's filing that answer into a very private vault. A quirky discovery, one of the barrels has a hidden compartment. Inside is a tiny bundle of letters sealed with wax, marked with the sigil of the Royal Navy. They weren't listed on the manifest. You don't open them, not yet, but you know what they might be. Orders, secrets, or something worse. You stash them in your quarters, under the mattress, next to the old compass and the knife you never stopped carrying. That night you gather the crew on deck. You pour 2 jugs of the captured wine into tin cups. Raise your voice just enough to ride the wind. Today we hunted, tomorrow we build. This ship isn't a ghost anymore. She's blood and bone and sail, and she will be feared. The crew erupts, not loud, not rowdy, but with a fierce low cheer that's more dangerous than screaming. They believe you, or they're starting to. That's enough. You sleep better that night, not deep, but without fear. The sea is quieter. The Revenant has tasted power again, and so have you. The next week bleeds by like oil in water, slow at the edges, quick in the middle, and just a little too dark to feel safe. You run a tight ship and you run it hard. The crew learns quickly that you don't tolerate slacklines or sloppy seams, that you check the knots yourself and inspect the powder stores every 2 nights. You speak rarely, but when you do, people move. That's not respect, not yet. That's fear. Fear you can work with. Every day starts at first light with a deck check and ends with a knife count. You don't trust these people, not yet. Some are still testing you with eyes that linger too long. Others follow like dogs hoping for scraps of power. You don't care which they are, as long as they pull their weight and point their blades the right direction. Elsie's grown into her new title faster than you expected. She moves through the crew with the awkward confidence of someone too young to know how young they look. She still asks you things, too many things sometimes, but she's learning when to keep her questions to herself. You watch her sort rations one morning, counting with the seriousness of a scholar handling ancient scrolls, and you see it, the spark. She's becoming something. Maybe not a captain, but maybe something harder. Someone you can trust. You dock twice. Once at a forgotten quay where the birds scream louder than the waves, and once at a floating port called Dead Jib, barely more than a ring of lashed ships and broken hulls tethered by desperation and ambition. Dead Jib is where you trade the barrels of wine from the sloop, not all of them, just enough to grease hands and raise eyebrows. You keep the rest for leverage. Everything's leverage now. At Dead Jib you meet someone unexpected, not a hunter, not a ghost, a girl named Rhea. She's maybe 16, wears a coat too big and boots too small, but the pistol she carries is polished and loaded. She's been on her own for at least a year, running messages between wreckage ports for coin. You offer her a place on the ship, not out of charity, but because she doesn't flinch when Rask throws a knife into the mast just inches from her head. She watches it, then looks at him and says, "You owe me a new message." You like her immediately. Rhea brings news with her, whispers from the southern routes, a new admiral in the navy, one who doesn't care about due process or jurisdiction. He's taken 4 pirate crews in 3 weeks. No trials, just ropes and fire. Some say he's been asking about a woman matching your general description. "You're famous," Morel says that night, leaning against the hatch with that usual infuriating calm. "Heard someone in the cantina call you the widow of Windward." You raise an eyebrow. "Was I married?" "Apparently. To the sea." You snort. "Divorced. Irreconcilable differences." Morel watches you a moment longer, then tosses something onto your desk. A map, not hand-drawn, printed, Navy style. It shows a cluster of isles near Isla del Pacto, and on it, circled in red, a shipping lane. "You thinking about raiding it?" you ask. She shakes her head. "I'm thinking they are." "They?" She points to a strange mark on the map, an unfamiliar symbol, jagged and looping, stamped in ink you can't quite place. "There's a new crew forming. Call themselves the Coil. Real coordinated, real quiet. No one knows who leads them." You run your thumb over the mark. You think they're a threat. I think they're a message, same as you. That night you think about that. About the way your name is being twisted again. About how every new label, siren, widow, revenant, feels like a mask someone else picked out for you. None of them fit, and all of them stick. There's a historical echo in it, of course. Female pirates were almost always recast as symbols, warnings or monsters, not people. Anne Bonny wasn't remembered as clever or brutal or strategic. She was remembered for being there, for being female in a space that didn't allow it. Even Qingxi with her armada and empire was reduced to a myth. You're not interested in myth, you want impact. And if someone's trying to challenge that, be it Navy or Coil, you're not going to wait around for them to draw first blood. So you draw it instead. You start sending messages, not letters, not threats, actions. You raid a Navy supply schooner off the southern coast. Take nothing but the gold buttons from the captain's coat. Leave the ship floating, sails intact. You hang a plank from the bowsprit that says, "She sails still." You intercept a coil scout ship. At least that's what you assume it is, judging by the odd rigging and lack of standard markings. You strip it, burn the deck, and leave a rope ladder trailing in the sea. The ends dyed red with crushed berries. Not blood, not this time. But the message lands just the same. Word spreads. At a storm-wrecked port called Caldera's Mouth, someone calls you the Tide Walker. You don't correct them. Why bother? Quirky detail, someone on the crew carves a tiny wooden figure of you and sticks it near the prow. It's disturbingly accurate, except it has a crown. When you ask who did it, everyone shrugs. You keep it anyway. Elsie starts keeping a journal now. She never says what she writes, but you know it's part record, part spell. She's anchoring herself in story, writing down what the world might forget. You envy her a little for that. There's an open debate now on the ship. Are you building something, or just running faster in tighter circles? You don't answer it. Not out loud. But deep down you wonder if the sea will ever really let you stop. Because the truth is, when you stand at the wheel, hand steady, wind slicing through your coat, eyes locked on a horizon only you can name, you feel more alive than you ever did in any cave, even if it kills you. The next storm doesn't come from the sea, it comes from inside your ship. It starts with a whisper, as mutinies always do. One crew member asking another if they really think you're leading them somewhere worth dying for. Then another wondering aloud why no one's seen the haul from the last raid. And then someone else starts counting meals, loudly, in front of everyone. You feel it gathering before it even has a shape, like heat in the air before lightning strikes. You've been here before, not on this ship, not with these faces, but the scent is always the same, suspicion stirred gently with hunger, doubt that festers because no one's bleeding, yet. It's Rask who brings it to you first during a routine cannon check. "Trouble's stirring," he mutters, running a hand over the gun's iron edge. "Names?" you ask, keeping your eyes on the ropes he's retying. He shrugs. "Too early, but it's spreading quiet." He doesn't say it, but you both know what that means. Organised. Thought out. Which is worse than rage. Rage is easy. You punch rage in the teeth and move on. But organised doubt? That's a different beast. That's rot. Slow, sure. You don't sleep that night. Not from fear, from calculation. You watch the moonlight paint the deck in strips. Think about every name, every role, every eye that's lingered too long when you've spoken. You make a list in your head. 5 names, 2 of them are people you liked. Elsie notices the shift before you tell her. "You're quieter," she says, leaning on the rail beside you. "Not that you were chatty before." You nod once. Ship's too calm. She follows your gaze across the sea. You think they're coming for you. You glance at her. No, they're coming for what I've built. That's worse. She doesn't flinch. Then we don't let them. That's the thing about Elsie. She's still too new to know when fear is appropriate. But her loyalty's solid, and in this business, that's rarer than gold. By the second night, you've gathered the signs. Someone's moved the gunpowder. Not far, just enough to remind you they could. A coil of rope left cut near the stern post. Food going missing in patterns, not accidents. Even the scarecrow someone rigged up to resemble you, Captain Misfortune, goes overboard. You find it floating face down, stripped of its hat, knife still sticking out of its back. They're getting bold, so you get bolder. At dawn you call a full-deck meeting. No exceptions. Everyone comes, of course. You don't refuse a captain's summons, not openly. But the mood is tense. The wind carries fewer laughs. Too many people have hands near blades. You don't speak at first. You let them stew, let the silence stretch. When you finally talk, your voice is calm and cold enough to peel paint. There's a rot in this ship, you say. Not in the wood, not in the sails, in the hearts. That catches them. You see it in the way a few eyes drop by how some shift their weight, suddenly too aware of their own feet. I've commanded crews twice this size, you continue. Lost ships, taken ships, buried captains and raised banners. I've watched men stab each other over a crust of bread and women shoot their way through legends. And you know what always came before the fall? Silence. You let it hang. Whispers, like the ones I hear now. Someone scoffs. You zero in on it, a lanky sailor named Bren. Former smuggler. Too charming. Too loud when the rum flows. Problem, Bren? He grins. Just thinking maybe people want a captain who shares the plunder, that's all. A few scattered murmurs. He's not wrong. You haven't distributed loot traditionally. You've been trading it. Supplies, leverage, safety. Not silver. Not yet. But that's by design. You weren't building a treasure hoard, you were building power. You step down from the quarterdeck, boots hitting the wood like punctuation. Walk slowly to Bren. Stop a foot away. Do you want to run this ship? He blinks. I didn't say that. Do you think you can? And he hesitates. That's enough. In one smooth move, you yank the knife from your belt and bury it in the mast beside his head. Not skin, not blood, just warning, close enough to feel. He doesn't flinch, but he does stop smiling. You lean in. Next time you want my seat, you try for it out loud. You turn back to the crew. You want the silver? Fine. We divvy it tonight. But if anyone's caught plotting in the dark again, they'll wish they drowned before they got here. No one cheers, but no one speaks up either. Later, in your quarters, Morel appears, as always, uninvited. She sits, sips your water, looks at you with that amused face. You handled it well. I bought time, you reply. Same thing. She taps the map she brought you earlier, the one with the coil's route. They're growing too, same whispers, same promises. A better kind of piracy, they say. You laugh once, bitter. There's no better kind, just different kinds of broken. Quirky fact. Later that week, Rhea finds a message in a bottle floating near the stern. It's addressed to the captain of the Revenant. Inside is a single coin, not a standard doubloon, not royal. It's carved with that same jagged coil symbol. No note, no threat, just the coin, heavy, real. You carry it around for a day, rubbing your thumb over the groove until the metal shines, and then you toss it into the sea. You've had enough of people sending messages. Time they start receiving them. You call Elsie that night, give her a name, a port, a target. The crew thinks they scared you back into the role of Pirate Queen. They're wrong. You're not here to raid anymore. You're here to send a message that echoes across every deck and dock from here to the Devil's Teeth. The Revenant isn't a ship, she's a storm, and you're her lightning. You sail towards the smoke before you ever see it. The sky tells you first, just a dull bruise on the horizon, the kind of thick, unnatural grey that doesn't belong to any storm cloud. No thunder, no wind shift, just that heavy choked stain rising up from the sea's edge, blotting out the pale blue like someone spilled ink over a map. Rask spots it first through the spyglass. He doesn't speak, he just hands it to you, slow and grim. You raise the glass and catch it. Charred masts, a hull split wide like cracked bone, flames licking what's left of the stern. The ship isn't moving. She's dead in the water, sails burned down to ribs, smoke spiralling up like a final scream, and floating around her, debris, barrels, bits of plank, no survivors, not on deck anyway. Your jaw tightens, because you know that ship. It's the Gannet, a merchant vessel with questionable loyalties and a taste for overpricing essentials in outlaw ports. She was harmless, annoying, sure, but harmless, and now she's been picked clean, burned, and left like bait. The coil. Has to be. It fits too well. The jagged signature of the overkill. The way they destroy as a message, not just a tactic. You feel the shift run through your crew before anyone says a word. They recognise it too. Not just violence. Style. Orders? Elsie asks, voice clipped. You don't hesitate. Circle her, I want to see if they left a note. You approach slowly, carefully. The air smells like resin and salt and something scorched to the bone. The fire's mostly out now, but the deck still hisses where wet and ember touch. You send a boarding team, Rhea volunteers. You watch her climb the rope like she's done it all her life. 10 minutes later, she returns. She's pale, not frightened. Pale, like the truth of what she saw drained the colour from her face. They left someone, she says. You go aboard yourself, because sometimes the only way to understand a message is to read it in person. The survivor is tied to the mainmast. A woman, merchant crew by the look of her, stripped of uniform and gear, hands bound tight. She's alive, but barely. Face swollen, lips split, one eye half shut, but she's breathing. Someone carved something into the mast above her head. You climb closer and read it. She takes the unworthy. You don't need to ask who she is. You cut the ropes and lift the woman gently. She flinches, but doesn't scream, doesn't speak either. You carry her back across the planks like driftwood. She weighs almost nothing. Back on the Revenant, Maud tends to her wounds. No major injuries, but plenty of damage. Enough to leave scars if she lives. You sit in your quarters and think, not just about the coil, but about what they want. Power, yes. Territory, sure. But above all, fear. Not the old kind, pirate fear. That's too clumsy. They want surgical terror. They want people to hear their name and abandon ship before the sails even rise on the horizon. You've seen this before. Once, long ago, you sailed near a man called Captain Rix. Before he vanished into legend or flame, depending on who tells it, he used to hang fake bodies off the prow of his ship just to force surrender. It worked, until someone got tired of seeing corpses sway in the wind and set his ship on fire while he slept. The coil's smarter than Rix, but maybe not braver. Elsie enters later that night with the latest report. 3 more merchant ships vanished near Isla Ferris. Same pattern. No distress flags. Just gone. You nod. They're cutting a line, trying to control the Middle Sea. They're not subtle. They don't want to be. You decide to hit back. Not with a full raid, not yet, with information. You call Rhea, hand her a satchel of coin and a folded message written in your hand. Get this to Dead Jib. Have them pass it on to the floating tavern at Port Latch. Someone there will know what to do. She takes it without question. Elsie watches, arms crossed. You're spreading stories now? No, you say. I'm spreading bait. Quirky fact. Someone paints the Revenant's name on the mainsail in charcoal mixed with crushed berries. It looks like blood. Rhea's idea. She says it'll make sure people remember you when the coil starts writing their own myth. For once you agree. That night you hold a meeting. Not mandatory, just open. You tell the crew what happened to the Gannet. You show them the words carved into the mast. You let the quiet do most of the work. Then you say, we're not running. If they are building an empire, we'll be the one fire they can't put out. Someone, Bren, again this time slightly more humble, says, how? They outnumber us. They've got reach. You smile, small and sharp. Because we're not trying to win. We're trying to ruin. You strike fast. Small targets. Their supply skiffs. The tiny tendrils that feed their larger ships. You don't even take anything. You just burn the food and sink the barrels. You leave ropes cut in a particular pattern. 3 coils, 2 slashed, 1 whole. They'll get the message. You leave no bodies, just noise. It starts working. By the end of the week, whispers shift. People start calling the Revenant the Unshackler. They say you free the ships that the coil traps. You let people choose what they want to be. That's the power the coil hates most. Morel finally says it aloud one night. You're not a pirate anymore. You sip your drink, stare out into the Black Sea. Never was. Then what are you? You don't answer, because you don't know. And maybe that's the point. If the coil is a weapon, maybe you're a wound, one that never scabs over. You decide to end it at dawn, not because you want to, not because you're ready, but because stories like this only last so long before they devour themselves. You've been hunted, hailed, cursed, copied. You've buried captains and crowned yourself in their ashes. The coil's getting bolder. You hear rumours now of a flagship, sleek, silent, black-sailed, and it's cutting through the Middle Sea like a blade through silk. It's only a matter of time before they come for you directly. So you choose the time, you choose the place. Isla Ferris. The coil's new jewel. A crescent of white cliffs and jungle-thick interior surrounded by natural harbours and gun-friendly ridges. It's not a fortress yet, but it's close. If they dig in deeper, they'll become the kind of problem that generations regret. You plan to hit them hard, fast and loud. Not to destroy them. You're not arrogant enough to believe one ship can do that. But to fracture the illusion. To remind them they're mortal, to give others the spark to rise. The crew doesn't flinch when you lay it out. Not even Bren. Maybe especially not Bren. He's been different since the near mutiny. Quieter, hungrier. Raska doesn't say much either. Just sharpens his blades and starts muttering to the cannons like old friends reunited for one last heist. Elsie takes your orders with a calm that would have startled the version of her you met back on that beach. Now she's half grown into myth herself. The quartermaster coat hangs just right. The pistol doesn't tremble in her grip anymore. Rhea too is steady. She's stopped calling it a crew. Now she says we. And you? You feel heavier, not weak, just worn. Like a blade that's been in one too many fights and knows it's got one more in it. Just one? You sail under cloud cover, using the rocks near Isla Ferris as a screen. No lights, no flag, just the wind, the hull, and the thrum of something final. The Revenant moves like she's listening, like she knows this is what she was made for. Her timbers creak in rhythm, her sails hold breath. You man the wheel and say nothing. No rousing speech, no declarations, just purpose. It's a clean plan, as clean as chaos can be. You approach from the south, where the cliffside is weakest and the beach is unguarded. 2 boats, one led by Elsie, the other by Rask, hit shore first to cause a distraction. Fires, smoke screens, explosions if needed. You sail in from the harbour side once the coil scrambles. It works for a while. The first fire lights the jungle like a lantern. Then another. Then shouting. The coil's bell tower rings once, then again. By the 3rd toll, you're slipping through their outer harbour, sails trimmed low, wind at your back. You can smell panic already. Smoke and gunpowder and the sharp metallic tang of fear. And then it happens. The coil's flagship appears. Not from the docks, from beneath. She rises from a hidden slip carved into the cliff itself, lifted by ropes and pulleys and cursed engineering you've never seen before. Sleek, black, long as a cathedral, no figurehead, just that jagged symbol etched across her hull in flaked silver. You mutter, "Clever bastards." Rask doesn't wait for orders. He fires the first shot. It rings true, splinters the forward rail and sends men scrambling. But it's not enough. The coil flagship opens fire in turn, cannonballs shriek past the Revenant's deck, one slamming into the stern and rattling you off your feet. You taste blood, wipe it from your lip. You bellow for full sails, and the Revenant obeys. You don't fight clean, you don't fight fair, you fight like a story that refuses to end. You ram once, hard enough to send coil bodies flying overboard. You duck under their cannon and arc, swing in for boarding, and send Rask across with a scream and a grin. You follow, blade in hand, boots hitting their deck like a sermon. The fight is vicious, close quarters, no rules. Elsie finds you mid-brawl, one eye bloodied, shouting orders like she was born to do it. Rhea's somewhere in the smoke, pistol flashing like a heartbeat. You cut down 3 coil fighters before you lose count. One nearly gets you with a hook. You bury your knife in his shoulder and throw him overboard with a curse. Then you see her, the coil captain, tall, pale, unsmiling and not shouting, just watching. She steps forward like she's at a dance, draws a blade that gleams red in the firelight. She doesn't announce herself. She just attacks. You parry, barely. She's fast, clean, precise, no wasted moves. Like someone who trained for years and then killed her teacher for being too slow. You match her, step for step, cut for cut. Steel sings against steel, the deck pitches, the fire roars, and around you the battle swells like a tide that won't wait. She gets in close once, too close, and whispers, "You're the story they tell little girls to keep them wild." You grin, and let's make it a good ending. You break her stance, knock her blade aside, but she doesn't fall, doesn't yield, she just smiles, and throws herself overboard. You rush to the rail, expecting a splash, but there's none. She's gone, like smoke. The coil flagship begins to crumble. Fires spread, sailcloth ignites. You shout for the Revenant. She circles back like a loyal dog, lines ready. Your crew scrambles aboard. Elsie last. You pull her up just as the coil ship begins to sink. You sail away at full tilt, limping, scorched but whole. Barely. The cove where you hide afterward is narrow, dark, quiet. Wounds are tended. Numbers are counted. The woman from the Gannet, still alive, sits in the corner, finally speaking. "I thought you were a myth," she tells you. You shrug. Sometimes I think that too. Quirky fact, someone finds the scarecrow again. Captain Misfortune, washed up on shore, still intact, biased. You tie it to the mast this time. Give it a second chance, like the rest of you. There's an open question now hanging over every hammock and hanging lantern. What happens next? The coil isn't dead, but they're bleeding. And so are you. The sea's quiet again. But it won't stay that way. Still for tonight, your ship floats, your crew breathes, and you sit at the wheel, wrap your coat tight, and stare at the horizon. You don't know what name they'll give you next, but whatever it is, you'll earn it.